If that sounds good to y'all, I'll call our work session to order. Good afternoon. This nice March 5th, David, I'll turn it over to you.
March 5th and 80-some degrees outside. Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to jump right to informal reports. And the first informal report is on firework calls for the 4th of July and New Year's. And Robert Allridge is here if there are any questions.
I have a comment or two.
All right, Chief, come on up here.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Good afternoon, Chief. From the PD side of thing, I just wanted to know, since we changed, our prior approaches to reporting, illegal fireworks in the city, how did that measure up with what you've seen in the year prior?
So you have the charts kind of in front of you, and the calls that we looked at were the calls that came in the 911 dispatch center and also those calls on 4th of July that came through the fire department. And so you can see on the first chart from 2019 to 2023, we had a pretty significant increase in fireworks overall. So whenever I looked at I kind of narrowed it down a little bit from 2022 to 2023. And you can see on 3rd and 4th of July, there was only one patrol division that had a decrease, and that was in Northwest, which was in your district, Carlos. And if you looked at July 1st, the New Year's holiday, when you looked at patrol divisions, basically there was a decrease across the board. However, I broke it down a little bit further and went down into council districts because the council districts are a little bit smaller than the patrol divisions. And you can see that for the 3rd and 4th of July, districts 3, 4, 5, and 7 saw a decrease. And then whenever you looked at the New Year's, there was increases in 4, 7, and 8. So the numbers are, pretty scattered across the board, but I think probably more concerning for us is that if you look at it from 2019 to 2024, just a significant increase overall.
From a number of citations issued, can you comment on that, Chief?
So we normally don't have a tremendous number of citations that are issued through the 3rd or 4th and the 1st, because really the challenge is we have to catch people in their possession. And so that's really a big challenge. And so we have very limited citations across all of the years.
Okay. And is that inclusive of PD and fire? Or?
It is,
okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. All right. Since fire is up there, I don't know if there's something else to be added from your side of things?
We were just up here in case any questions that.
Okay. All right. Just giving you the opportunity to do that, because sometimes I think fire did receive some calls I guess, through certain stations, and I don't know if you elected to respond to specific concerns, maybe ongoing firework activity in neighborhoods where maybe you could catch them in the act.
Yeah, so, fire's priority on those dispatches. All of the enforcement, we lean towards supporting the police department, so we work with them on what they need. Our focus is on responding when there's a report of a fire or an injury or significant potential of that. So to kind of be sure that we're ready for that life safety first approach.
Okay. And I don't know if either of you would know this. This is my last question. Did we get significant use or decent use of the My Fort Worth app to report illegal fireworks? I don't know if we have that information broken
So
down.
we didn't collect that data for this report. The majority of the calls came in through the call center that the fire staffs on the 3rd and 4th of July, and then of course through 911, because most people, they believe they want the immediate response, and the My Fort Worth app is not an immediate. I mean, it's a little bit of a delayed response.
Sure. Okay. Well, that's all my questions. Thank you both.
I
Appreciate
think
it.
Gina had a question too.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. The chief mentioned District 5 among those districts that saw increase, and that's directly because of the involvement of 3 neighborhood association presidents. Tarchie White, Cindy Bowling, and Judy Taylor launched a full-scale campaign that included political-like yard signs, advising of the fine that people would be subjected to if they engaged in illegal fireworks. And so it didn't just happen because something magical happened. These 3 ladies, after meeting with police and fire and code, have brought about some tangible and measurable results. And my hat goes off to them. Any other districts who want to know how to bring them down in your district, I'll connect you with those ladies, and we'll all be able to celebrate. Huh?
So
You
the
want
one thing
to-
I'd like to add before I walk away with our listening audience, fireworks are illegal. You can have fireworks, and there are substantial fines if we catch them with them.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions?
Okay,
Thanks, Chief.
you bet.
The next informal report is on automatic car washes and those permitted since January of 2020. And DJ Harrell is available if there are any questions. No car wash questions. Next up is Fort Worth Public Art and Private Development Review Process. Again, DJ Harrell is available if there are any questions.
Yes, I'd like to.
DJ? There he is.
I think my only question really, DJ, for you is the implementation of adding that, information layer, to our ArcGIS, system. Staff in working with Justin Newhart, over in Historic Preservation and Development Services, I thought applied that very well. I mean, Fort Worth Public Art have this information of the location of, art pieces. And I think it's very important when we do development across the city, especially in our historic areas, that we're very cognizant and fully aware during the permitting process that we don't overlook something that may be there, could easily be overlooked and perhaps lost. So I think, adding that layer, to what we look at during that process is a very smart move. So I want to commend your staff, on coming up with that. My only question is, implementation-wise, how quickly can that be implemented?
I would say near immediately. Justin's team's already gotten the layer or the locations from the public art folks. And so they've, began working with our GIS folks to map it in the system. In general, most of our public art is going to be found on city property or in city right-of-way. So we won't run into a lot of situations where private development will be affecting it. However, we're trying to figure a way to work it into the development process without slowing the development process down to where staff takes a moment to say, okay, there's some public art in the area. How are we going to protect it? How are we going to make sure our signals aren't crossed? And so that's what we're trying to think through now. But as far as identifying the locations and being able to kind of bring our antennas up, during the development review process, that's already getting started.
Great. And it just occurred to me one other question. Since Fort Worth Public Art has detailed information beyond just location, if you're looking at a given art piece, maybe it's something that's been given to the city or has a deed of gift attached to it. Once you locate it, on our mapping process, could we cross-reference that information there, or is it just merely give location information?
No, we can put that information in there as well.
Okay.
Basically in GIS, when you map these things, there's an attribute table that basically you can put all kind of information in about, whether was it something that we commissioned or was it something that was gifted to us? If it's something that's on loan to us, we can put all that information in the background.
Great. Well, again, my thanks for responding to my concern on this. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. Next informal report is on Community Development Block Grant, the Disaster Recovery Action Plan, and Victor Turner is available if there are any questions.
Councilwoman Beck has a few questions.
Victor?
Yes.
Hey, Victor. So I have a couple of questions, and just so you're clear and everybody else is clear why I asked for this, during our, the workshop that we had on homelessness, one thing we heard was that the city of Houston was kind of innovative with their disaster, their CBDG disaster money. And I understand that while we don't receive the same magnitude that they receive, thank God, we don't have things like hurricanes. I was interested in how we use those dollars and how we could compare to Houston in that sense of being innovative. And so that's really the place that I'm coming from in this. And I have a couple of questions. So I see that there are 4 program activities that were approved, the single-family 1 to 4 units housing for rehab, the multifamily housing for rehab, and reconstruction of properties impacted by the storm, mitigation, and then infrastructure. And that's specific to city-owned buildings and land improvements. Do you know how much we spent on mitigation initiatives and this city-owned buildings and land improvements as part of that roughly 37, we'll call it 38 million?
Mayor Council, it's 27.4 that we received. We haven't spent any of those dollars yet.
Okay,
We did coordinate with water on, to find out any impact to facilities that they may have. One of the things that we can't do is supplant other funds that were designated for a particular activity, so we have to be aware of duplication. In regards to the other activities, it has to tie back to the disaster, for one. We pull that directly from the language. It can have a direct or direct or indirect impact. So the way we were trying to work in the homelessness activity was an indirect impact.
okay. And when you say indirect impact, can you give me an idea of what that means and how we would implement that?
Yeah, for example, we already had demonstrated that we had a shortage of units available for homelessness. And so this exacerbated that problem by a shortage of units during that ice storm. And so we listed in the IR a couple examples of properties with over 500 units that cause a strain on our supply of affordable housing.
Okay, thank you for that. There's the last sentence here, it's important to note that in compliance with federal regulations, CBDG DR funds cannot be used for supportive services, vouchers, or general operating expenses. But I guess I need some clarification because I'm looking at the department HUD's disaster recovery homelessness toolkit, and it's got 3 pages worth of the activities that we can use these funds on, and services were explicitly listed in here. So can you walk me through how we got to it can't be for services?
Sure. So HUD provided us with a TA provider, and so we directed that question to them. And so we asked about that, and their response was that we could not use it out of the particular allocation we got. So each time there's a disaster, HUD issues a federal register and listed the different types of activities that you can use. And in Houston case, that may have been an example of some units that may have had folks with vouchers in it. I'm not certain, but they told us that we could not use it for vouchers.
So is it, then I guess, tell me what a TA is.
Technical assistance provider, my apologies.
No, that's okay. So what you're saying is that these grants are given to cities based on a qualifying disaster, and then what each city can use those on are different per the guidance of a TA?
In some instances, so say for example, we had public housing that was impacted, for example. Public housing is allowed to tap into our disaster money. We didn't have any public housing that was impacted. I'm sure Houston probably did. So they could use it at a public housing facility, whereas we could not. That's just one example.
Okay. I think I'm going to need a little more, discussion on this, because as I looked through this, this document in preparation for this IR, I don't see those prohibitions per HUD. And so I'm interested to know, I guess, the mechanism that those prohibitions came up for us in contradiction to HUD's guidance. Because if that's the case, then I think that's something to just add to our legislative, our upcoming legislative affairs agenda and for us to work with, because based on what HUD has put out, and I've got a presentation that they also gave in April of 2023 that provided the same information. And so we seem to be reaching a different result than what HUD is telling us we can do with it. Because when I look at this sheet, this reference guide, we can build new with these dollars, and we can provide services with these
No, I
dollars.
didn't say we couldn't build new.
Right.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is like the no services and support, and that it has to be a one-for-one there has to be damage to one unit for us to be able to do that. To build another one doesn't seem to be,
Well, maybe I'm not making myself perfectly clear. What we can do is, if we can tie it back to the storm, it doesn't necessarily have to be one for one.
okay,
As I mentioned, if it was direct or indirect, if you had an unmet need, we had an unmet need of homeless beforehand.
sure.
So that's why we put in there that we would include PSH as part of it. What the provider told us was operating expenses and vouchers were not allowed. There may be some clarification between that technical assistance provider and HUD who provided them to us.
Yeah, absolutely, because the first thing on this list is tenant-based rental assistance. So there does seem to be some sort of miscommunication there, and,
Yeah, and I could see where that may have been where there were some individuals that received tenant-based rental assistance, and they may have been renting at a complex that was impacted. So they would probably still need to receive that TBRA to locate to another facility.
okay. What about job training, childcare, or healthcare?
Yeah, so we did not include job training or any of those in our action plan. We did have to do an assessment of needs, so the actual units and activities that we listed were the ones that came back as our most unmet need.
Gotcha. Okay. I think in light of what we're trying to do here around housing, I'd like you to work with my office to set up some time so that I can better understand where that disconnect is and hopefully help you, us as a city, navigate that so that we can have the freedom that other cities do to be innovative with our funds.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Beck, just confusion, it's probably on my part. What are you concerned we didn't spend money on with those funds?
So in our briefing and what we were told is that we had these funds available, and what Houston did with them is they really invested in building that infrastructure, right?
Right.
And I think in discussions that that's not what we did in how we allocated it. And it was because there had to be this connection between the homeless person and what was damaged by the storm. And I think that maybe is too literal of an interpretation based on what I'm seeing that the HUD, that HUD has produced. I think that we have much more flexibility in how we spend these funds. And I'd like us to look to Houston as an example. If we know across the country that they are the standard for how to address homelessness, I want us to be able to have the freedom to do what they did, which was build from the ground up.
And I don't disagree. I think one thing I did take away pretty glaringly in that presentation that Tara and others provided is that Houston, it's not apples to apples because the volume of money they receive, especially in disaster recovery funds, that we're thankful we don't have that
Right.
need here. So to your point, I mean, I think there is need for clarification and, but at the same time, I fully respect the plan that you put in place and that this is a finite number of dollars. I know you're trying to stretch it across in a lot of different ways. So I appreciate where Elizabeth's trying to take you though.
Yeah, and in the IR itself, it says that for rehabilitation and development. So development is new construction.
Yeah.
Right, thank you, I appreciate that.
Thanks, Victor.
Thanks, Victor. The next informal report is a homelessness update, and Fernando Costa is available if there are any questions.
My only question, I think I can answer it, but this IR was just meant to memorialize the follow-up, correct? There's
Yes.
nothing in here that's new and different. It's just to say this is what the council agreed to during that session.
Yes, ma'am. The intent of this informal report is to explain the various actions by city staff in direct response to requests that the city council made at that February 13th homelessness workshop.
Thank you, Fernando. The one thing I'd have on the item note that we're going to start the pilot project, which I think is well worth an investment there, is I've gotten a few questions from people that paid attention during that session about what if they think they have an individual that would qualify for us to reach out to, are they or not on the list of people that are homelessness providers. And I just want it, maybe that's through Tara's office, it's the best person for
Yes,
referral. Okay,
Tara Perez.
Okay.
The list is not set in stone yet.
congrats, Tara. Okay, got it. Thank you.
I think you've just opened the floodgates.
I
but-
know, poor Tara.
Yeah.
She'd like us to publish her cell phone number. Thank you, Fernando.
Our next informal report is an interlocal agreement for arrestee EMS care and transport. Valerie Washington is available if there are any questions.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah, I'd like to hear about that, please. If you could just give us an overview of that, Val, and current status of the 350 agreement.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, and City Manager. The IR outlines an interlocal agreement that the City of Fort Worth is going to enter into with MedStar to provide EMS transports for arrestees that are in custody at 350 Belknap. I would say for the past, I think it's been noted, 10, 20 years, there hasn't been an ILA in place to handle those arrestees. MedStar has been working with the City of Fort Worth and with JPS to handle arrestees that are in Tarrant County's custodies to make sure that there are interlocal agreements in place that outline the terms and the cost for providing that service to us. It is just a one-year agreement with options to renew.
any additional questions, Carlos or council?
No, I think that, for me, that covers it right now. Thank you, Val.
Thank you.
All right, our next informal report is on the Office of Police Oversight Monitor and the mediation program. And Bonsil Sucumbi is available if there are any questions.
I think there are a few questions.
Bonsil.
Good afternoon, Monsieur.
Good afternoon.
Just first, I think I would like for you to kind of give us an overview. I think you met with all of us by now, kind of explaining what the OPOM Community Police Mediation Program is about. Essentially, it's a moderated approach for improving those relationships between police and community. And it also gives you, I think, a good avenue for, conflict resolution. So it's voluntary. It won't necessarily trigger penalties or punishment. And it's an environment where you have neutral and equal footing, I think, between the parties. I do know that police and the POA were very supportive of that. So I commend you, for doing, your due diligence and outreaching to them to have a good avenue of understanding, between that and have that mutual dialogue. So tell us how you plan to roll that out to the communities, because it's very essential, right, to have that kind of relationship. And then my next question is going to be pertaining to personnel that you may need in addition to who you've hired. So first off, please explain how you plan to roll that out to the communities.
So the rollout is going to be a joint effort between myself, the police department, the city of Fort Worth, and the POA, because we have several entities that need to be on board to ensure that it's a successful rollout. For a community, we've already started working with the communications department, with media, and we have teaser videos ready for press to send out. In the development of the program, the development process started in 2021. There were several meetings with community members, community leaders, and organizations, and re-involving them is something that I took very seriously when I came on board. And so they're currently engaged, and we are letting them know that this is going to be a process that's available to them starting officially in April with the police department. We've already started working with the pro team with the police department to assist in the rollout for the communities that they might have an easier time reaching, as well with the police association to ensure that we have buy-in from the officers as well.
So when do the teaser videos, will it be in other languages other than English?
Yes.
Great, great. Okay, and then my question that I've already alluded to is, you've hired recently into your department. I don't know if you're fully staffed at this point, but maybe if you could share with council what needs you might have still yet to fill.
So we have hired recently, we hired additional policy analysts, and prior to my onboarding, we did hire a community engagement director who will be running the mediation program. We currently have 2 positions open for a second policy analyst and for a deputy police monitor, and those are positions that we'll need to fill at this time.
All right, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, of course, Councilman Nettles.
Thank you. I may have, if Assistant Chief is here as well. Because I know as we talk, some of the incentives of making this mediation happen, I just have a question with our department. What are we going to do as a department to try to incentivize officers to go through this mediation process, if any at all?
So really, it's just about making them aware. So part of this is, we want to make sure that the community and the police are working together. And there are times that some of those interactions aren't quite what we want them to be. But we also understand this is voluntary. This is just another option that an officer has, that if they choose not to go this route, then we investigate it through internal affairs. But the one good thing about this, if they choose to go through mediation, they will not go through an internal affairs investigation. So I think it's really highlighting the upsides to this, because there are very little downsides to this for the officers.
Thank you. And I guess, I think in our conversation, what is the percentage around when we have these incidents with officers that the resident really wants to be heard of, I want to know, I want his sergeant to know, or his captain to know how he mistreated me. I know there might not be any consequences behind it, but I just want to be heard, because that's kind of what this mediation is going to do.
So that is what it's based on. I can't give you the percentages on community members who automatically want to participate. What I can tell you is 21% of the cases that go through internal affairs would be eligible for mediation. And then what the statistics have shown is, by and large, over 75% of individuals that participate in mediation are satisfied with the outcome. That's just for the community members. And then for officers, it's about 90%. And more importantly, for both sides, they both indicate that there would be a change in behavior if they were involved in that same type of incident again.
Okay, and one other question I had is, Councilman Carlos alluded to the PLA supporting and the police department supporting it. And I guess here at the city, we're most likely supporting it. My question is, did we reach out, how do we reach out to the community and see how much support we have from the community, the residents and themselves?
Absolutely. So there were town hall meetings that started back in 2021, virtual, in person. And then when I came on board, I started doing my meetings and going around and following up to make sure that we still had that buy-in, as well as surveys ensuring that the community wanted to participate in this type of programming. And 100%, this is something that the community wanted to see, because people wanted to have the opportunity to use their voice and express their frustrations and anger versus going through a disciplinary process where they would not be afforded that opportunity.
Okay, I think this is a good program, and I will say, me personally, it's not because the office didn't do its job, but me personally, I didn't see a lot of information come across the table from my preview to hear about this mediation until I spoke with you. And I don't think that's on your office. I think it's just how we roll out information as it relates to the city of Fort Worth. So I think, just as Assistant Chief just mentioned, it's going to be very beneficial for our officers and our community to really know what this can do for the officer and for the community. And so I think it's going to be really important of our rollout. And I think that we need to really work with Renee's team, your team, and as a whole, as City Council, to flush this information out as soon as we're ready to go live with it. I think it's going to be very vital to our community.
Absolutely. And I do want to stress that the way that a community member gets involved is by filing a complaint. So as long as a community member is aware that they can file a complaint, we will contact them if it's eligible to let them know that they can participate in the program. So we wouldn't lose any community members who might not be aware right now, as long as they know that they have the option to file a complaint against a police officer.
Gina, go ahead.
Thank you for the information. Councilmember Nettles and I were together yesterday on another issue involving, I guess, equity, diversity, what have you. And what we tried to do was communicate to staff how important it is to involve the council office. We can be an extended arm for you, if you will, on public information. I think it's very important that the public know or be reminded who you are. So I have two questions for you. The first question is, will you please give us the Cliff Notes version of your background? People don't wake up every day wondering, well, what's her background, what's her experience? So What is your background?
I'll give the Cliff Notes version that most people want to hear is that I am a licensed attorney and I'm a former prosecutor. I came in from New Orleans, Louisiana, and I've been in law enforcement oversight for over the last 5 years. I want to stress I did that under a federal consent decree as well as local oversight in New Orleans, where policing has been considered some of the most corrupt that they've seen across the nation. And I had the opportunity to prosecute in Orleans Parish, trying cases ranging from low-level drug cases to life cases involving death penalty.
You summed that up. Thank you. And yes, it was very, very corrupt. And we're glad that we have you here now. The other question is, can you talk about other municipalities where mediation has been a tool in the toolbox? And how have you seen it roll out in terms of officer acceptance?
Absolutely. So I can refer to New Orleans, which I will because that's where I came from, and they have what is considered the national best practice for the community police mediation program. But I want to ensure the community that we're not just doing this one because New Orleans did it. This is a program that has been launched and successful in St. Louis, Missouri. This has been launched in Washington, D.C., New York City, Miami, and several other major cities across the nation. In addition to that, as we're seeing consent decrees pop up across the nation, this is something that's being implemented in order to build community trust. One of the data points that I did share with council is that when officers participate in the program, about 90% of the time they said that they have a change in perspective from participating in the mediation program. That is significant because while an average citizen may have 2 police encounters in their life, that officer is going to walk out the door and conduct another traffic stop. If we can have them stop and pause and possibly think about that interaction differently, then it is worth the investment that the city is making into this program.
Thank you. And if you can see that members on this council get some form of communique from you in terms of something we can use in social media, I think it would be helpful. And it lets us make sure that we launch the narrative as well. And we'd be more than happy, to do that. Carlos and I like stuff in JPEG. We don't like having to convert anything. And so that's just for you to know, but we'd love to be a part of helping.
We'll make sure to share that. Thank
Thank you.
Thank you. The next informal report is on a process for addressing junk vehicles, and Shannon Elder is available if there are any questions.
I think I'd asked for this IR. Is this,
Yeah.
Letitia, this the one? Okay. Yes. I'm sorry. I didn't realize this was on here today. So I think the original question I had was, there was a junk vehicle that was on the property of the owner's property. And it was tagged by, I guess, us, a code to have removed. So the concern is they own the lot, it's their vehicle, and we came onto their property to tag it.
Yes.
Okay.
So the Texas Transportation Code and then also our city ordinance does allow code officers to go onto private property to identify the vehicle and, if necessary, remove the vehicle. What we do is go onto the property to get the VIN number and license plate number and see if it has a unexpired registration sticker. We go ahead and place a green sticker that is more educational for anybody that's seeing it, that says what a junk vehicle is and what the process is, and gives the code officers information, because we want people to contact us to learn more about what's going on with that vehicle. In order to be a junk vehicle, it has to remain inoperable for over 20 consecutive days. So after 20 days, if they haven't reached out to us to show us that it's operable or removed it to where it's not seen from view, then we issue notice to the vehicle owner, any lien holders on that vehicle, the private property owner or tenant, and they can request a hearing, because we go through a hearing process to determine that it's a junk vehicle. Go ahead.
Is that the main issue, that it can be viewed or seen from others?
Yes, yes. So if the vehicle is considered a junk vehicle, if it can be viewed from any property other than the property that it is on.
Okay, because I did a ride out in Poly. Somebody didn't go, supposed to go with us. I'm not calling names, Jeanette. But we had a lot of, one of the residents were complaining about a lot of junk vehicles in the backyards. And riding through you really couldn't see, but I guess if I'm on my porch and I stand on top of my chair and I look over, I can see all the junk vehicles. Is,
If it can be seen from another property, then yes, it can meet the
Okay.
definition.
sure,
But just so you know, we have a very high owner abatement ratio for junk vehicles. It's about 96%. So in the end, we only end up towing about 4% of the vehicles that are deemed as junk vehicles.
how old is this ordinance? Do we know?
I saw stuff going back to 1997.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Jeanette. She can defend herself.
Chris, thank you so much for taking one for the team. I have a request. Would it be possible to create an educational campaign on junk vehicles and have that shared through our various platforms, but also on yard parking? So those two things. So that would be code.
Okay, great.
Okay,
I'll work with the police department on the yard parking.
Thanks.
All right. Our next informal report is on school traffic congestion issues, and we have Ty Thompson and Martin Phillips available if there are any questions.
Yes, sir, please.
Scared me. I forgot he was on.
Come on up, guys.
I was like, what? What do I listen
Yeah.
at?
I've been quiet
Jared,
all day.
I know, Jared, you scared me. I forgot you were there.
It's quite all right.
Go ahead, Jared, your questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Mayor. One, I think it's appropriate to have an update, and I guess the follow-up question I would have to the update is just explaining more about the requirements based on enrollment. And just as a caveat before y'all get started, I think all of us at the table agree that we want nothing more than our students to be successful, irrespective of what school they go to. And also, I personally have seen just differences in the way traffic and school drop up and pick up looks like across our city, depending on the schools. And I've particularly been concerned with the schools in Southwest Fort Worth, particularly public charter schools, and our kiddos' safety and our parents' safety with drop off and pick up. And I know that more could be done on the city's behalf to partner with our charter schools, both in the pre-development process, but also in kind of the traffic management plans and ensuring that those are adhered to, but also ensuring that campus leadership and campus staff has the wherewithal to be able to implement the plans that they're submitting in the development process. So thank y'all for this report. I'm looking forward to this conversation, and thanks in advance for the recommendations that y'all put forward in this.
Was that, because I was excited. That seemed good.
Yeah,
So what we've, recommendations that we have created, first it starts with a transportation engineering manual. What we'd like to do is revise the design requirement. Right now, when somebody comes in for a TI or a transportation management plan, we do not take the student body population and tie it to the transportation study. The reason why is because why we would like to do that in the future moving forward is because as schools grow, if they grow more than what they had anticipated, we've got to mitigate that traffic in some way. So we would like the opportunity to be able to go back and have a conversation. Now, that goes into creating relationships with all these ISDs and charter schools and private schools, because we need to reach out to them and explain, we want to be partners and we want to work through this in the most expeditious way that offers the least amount of disruption to them schooling the children or to the community.
Yeah, and I'd like to just speak a little bit to what happens if it's an existing school, and our coordination with the schools has been really positive to this point. We've reached out to those schools. We've worked through some changes that they've implemented based upon city recommendations. And so the expectation going forward is we're going to continue, we've benchmarked some, we're going to continue to benchmark. Other cities are experiencing the same issue. So we're going to continue to have that conversation with them. We're also going to continue to have conversations with the school leadership because it's been fruitful thus far. We just have to have more conversations with them, more discussions with the community so we can implement some of those changes that are beneficial all the way around.
Any other questions?
Thank y'all. And just another follow-up. I'm sorry, just one more follow-up. In terms of the traffic studies, what consideration will staff make in regards to schools when they don't have the bus drop-off? I noticed that was in the informal report as well. And it seems like that's been some of the, I guess, kind of disconnect between the study and then what happens on the ground once the school is operational.
So with regard to the transportation impact analysis, the study or model, what we take into consideration, say for a charter school that doesn't provide busing, we look at this, each student has, it's a 1-for-1 trip. So each student gets, basically, it's almost equal to 1. Whereas ISDs provide busing, so their traffic mitigation is much smaller that they have to take care of. So it does, the modeling does account for that, sir.
That makes sense. And then the last question, I promise I'll be done, y'all, is related to the parking as well. I know that at least with the charter schools in District 6, some of the angst has been there's not really been a adequate space on campus for parents to park and drop off. And I'm not sure if that's necessarily considered in the calculation. Can you provide some clarification to that?
Yes, sir. So that is actually part, it's a very large part of the traffic management plan, which requires that all schools, regardless of ISD or charter or private, that they queue all of their traffic on site. So they're not allowed to park in the right of way or across the street in a subdivision and wait. They must queue on the property of the school.
Great. Thank y'all so much. And thanks
Yes,
for
sir.
telling us. I know y'all spent a lot of time on it.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. The next informal report is on siting of municipal solid waste facilities, and Cody Wittenberg is available if there are any questions. All right, then our last informal report is an update on the use of our water My H2O portal, and Chris Harder is available if there's any questions. Without any questions, Mayor, that concludes my report.
Thank you, David. Looks like we are moving on to our regularly scheduled agenda unless there are any questions on M&C log, zoning cases, or boards and commissions upcoming for the next 2 weeks. Okay, first presentation is on the 2023 community survey results. Amethyst Sloan with Fort Worth Lab will lead us through that presentation.
Okay, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Amethyst Sloan, Strategy and Performance Manager, Fort Worth Lab. So some of you may know or not, every 2 years we go out and do a community survey. And we've been partnering with the ETC Institute for over 20 years to conduct this survey. Today, in a minute, I'll introduce you to Chris Tatham, the president of ETC, who's going to walk you through highlights and major findings from 2023. We've worked with them for a very, very long time. They're a national leader, and in the results, you'll see we have really strong comparative data, geographic data, demographic data, and insights as to what we're doing really well and areas to improve. This is a baseline survey. It's recurring, so every 2 years. So major questions remain similar over time, but in each survey, we do add a section to gather feedback and level of community support on specific initiatives. So this year, you'll see some of that about broadband and our open space initiatives. And shortly, so you've received the full report. You'll have this presentation today. In your inboxes as soon as probably later today, you'll also have a report of all of the maps by council district of the results. So you have that geographic data as well. And lab staff is available to you anytime if you'd like to go over the results specific to your district. The Communications and Public Engagement Department will be releasing an article with links to the full report to this later today. This week as well. And with that, I'm pleased to introduce you to Chris Tatham. I think we have him up on screen. And again, some of you will recognize him. He usually comes to visit us every 2 years to give this report. And he'll also give you an idea and some information about the methodologies for this report and why this survey is so relevant and important as we move forward.
It's great to be with you today. And is, I guess, the city going to be presenting and controlling, I think, the presentation?
Yes, I've got you.
Very good. Awesome. Well, anyway, it's great to be back. For those of you who don't know me, I've actually been coming down to Fort Worth since 2002. In fact, the next slide, if you go on, it shows a little bit of our experience. National ETC Institute and I does work on 4 continents. We actually do surveys for more than 50 communities in Texas, including 9 of the 10 largest. Our clients include 26 of the 35 largest U.S. cities, and we do our own national research every year. So when you see us compare Fort Worth's results to other communities, they're head to head. They're the same methodology, same question. And that allows us to provide some interpretive context that you may not get if you just do a standalone survey. So Fort Worth is especially important to me. And now that I lead the company, because you were the very first large city I ever did a survey for. So I've been coming back all these years just to remember where our firm started. So I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. And from that, I'm going to kind of walk through what we're going to do. So the next slide is just the agenda. Just shows a little bit about what we're going to talk about. Since you're the ones who ultimately use the data, I want to make sure you're comfortable with the methodology and kind of how we did it. Because if you don't have confidence in the results, they're not going to be something you're going to use for decision making. So I just want to walk you through that. Then I'm going to identify what I'd say 5 major findings or things that I take away. There's a lot of information in the report, but frankly, if I get into all the details, you probably won't remember anything. So I'm hoping to at least share with you what I think the big takeaways are. And then at the end, if there's time, I'll certainly be happy to answer some questions. So anyway, if you go to the next chart, it's just a little bit about the purpose. If you follow trends with attendance at local government meetings, even with online forums, only about 5% of US residents actually are engaged in those kinds of meetings. One of the challenges you have is oftentimes what does the rest of the community think? Because we actually did a survey a couple of years ago. We found out the #1 reason people attend meetings is to see people get awards and recognition or get it themselves. #2 is to basically express a complaint about something. And #3 is to change the way things are doing. So the average citizen or resident just doesn't have time to come to meetings. And oftentimes without a process like this, you don't hear what their priorities are. And Fort Worth has been committed to doing this for more than 20 years, and you're really to be commended for that. So I'm going to walk you through what we found this year. But before I do, go on to the next chart, I might just talk a little bit about the methodology, because these days everybody's getting surveys. You don't know if the survey is good or bad. Good thing for you is I just tell you how the survey results are. I've been doing this for you for 22 years, and when things have been really good, I've told you that. When things have gone down, I've told you that. So I'm not here to please you. I'm just here to let you know what the results are. For this survey, we select 1,000 households at random in each of your council districts, and it's done through address-based sampling. We then mail them surveys, and then we follow up with social media. We follow up with text, emails. And the way we control the samples, we require respondents to give us their home address to make sure they're actually part of our random sample. And that's done just to make sure that when we're all done, the people who are represented in the survey truly are residents of Fort Worth and that they were randomly selected for the process. And these results aren't perfect. They have an accuracy of about plus or minus 2.5% at the 95% level of confidence. And that just means if we did the survey the same way 100 times, you get these results within about 3% or less. So it's a very good sample, and it's also accurate for each of your council districts. Next chart that just shows a little bit about where the people responded from. You see we have little teeny red dots all over the city. It's not so that we can go visit their home. We actually don't tag their exact address. But the idea is we want to make sure that there's good representation from the whole city. We also match the results of our survey up to census estimates with regard to things like race, age, gender, and other factors, and it aligns very, very well. So at the end of the day, from my professional opinion, we've got another great sample this year, which I think you can have confidence that you can use this data to make good decisions. So with that, here's the 5 things that I hope you can remember from today's presentation. There's a lot more here, but #1, as you see in the results, and if you looked at the report, overall satisfaction's decreased with most services. But the decreases in Fort Worth are actually less than national trends, and I'll talk to those in just a little bit. Even though some of the results have decreased, most of your residents still have a pretty favorable impression of the city, and that's been something that's been that way for a long time and continues. And your overall satisfaction ratings are above the national average, which I'll share with you in a few minutes. If you're going to continue to do well or see increases in satisfaction in the future, street maintenance, traffic flow, police, cleanliness and appearance of the city should be the top priorities. And I found it interesting that those were a lot of the items in the short reports I heard before this meeting, which suggests you're aligned with residents think priorities are as far as what you're discussing and planning for. And then the last item I want to identify, which is new this year, is just how dramatically different perceptions are in the city based on the respondent's age. Oftentimes geography, council district or race or other factors can be a driving factor that can polarize a community. This year, we're finding that age is one of the most differential factors in the survey results, and I'll share that with you toward the end. So that's where we're headed. So let me just kind of walk through each of these, and I'll give you some of the major takeaways. So the first, let's talk about what's happened with the trends. And if you go to the next chart, you'll see that we asked questions for 97 items. This is a pretty comprehensive survey, both in 2021 and 2023, and 88 of those 97 areas declined. We saw a surge in ratings after COVID, where people felt a lot of public health and other things in local communities have been responsive. But as the world's returned to normal and we've had challenges with the economy, with public shootings and things like that, we've seen decreases really across the country decline. In fact, the national average for large cities, which is residents or communities that have more than 250,000 residents, has gone down by 6.3% over the last 2 years. Fort Worth is down an average of 4.4%. So overall, you're actually doing better than the nation, but you are down in most areas. If you look at the top decreases that we saw, which is on the next chart, we actually see that things like local traffic law enforcement, visibility of police, pavement markings, how well litter is kept under control, street lighting, have kids being safe in school. Those are the areas we saw the biggest decreases are. Part of that is we saw a lot of increases as traffic came to a halt during COVID, but now that things have been returning to normal, traffic flow is becoming a bigger issue, along with safety and other things, with a lot of the things that people see reported in the media the last couple of years. The good news, at least from my perspective, particularly for Fort Worth, is on the next chart, which are your most significant increases. You'll notice that of the items listed here, 4 of these 5 have to do with customer service. And actually, most communities have had a hard time responding to rising expectations with customer service. But you see Fort Worth's ratings for how easy it is to contact city staff, the promptness and accuracy they get from staff, staff doing what they say in a timely manner, and the overall courtesy and politeness, they all improved from the last survey. That's going against the national trend. We also saw improvements in mowing and trimming along city streets. So great job with your staff and customer service. So that's the first takeaway. Things have gone down, but you're gone down a little bit less than the national average. Next chart shows the second thing I hope you take away with, is that though we've seen some decreases in satisfaction, residents still generally have a pretty positive attitude toward the city. And one of the first things I look at is on this next chart, you'll see that 91% feel that the economy in Fort Worth is the same or better than the rest of the country. In fact, if you look at the percentage that it's better compared to worse, it's 5-1. So most residents feel much better about the economy, or at least they think Fort Worth is better off than other people. Next chart just shows the perceptions of how people would rate the city as a place to live, as a place to work, place to raise children, and retire. And you can see the majority of people in most cases give those good or excellent ratings. They're particularly high as a place to live and a place to raise children and work. You can see those all have relatively low negativity, but we do see some slightly higher negatives for as a place to retire. One of the things that impresses me when I always do these surveys for Fort Worth is how similar a lot of the ratings are for things like quality of life. If you go to the next chart, one of the things that you'll notice is when we did the mean rating for how residents rate the city as a place to live, you get the same rating more or less in every council district. So though there are some differences based on people's ratings of concerns related to some of the issues related to pools, things like traffic congestion and so forth, when it comes to just the overall rating as a place to live, it really doesn't matter what council district you live in. You have very similar perceptions, and they're high, which you can see all the districts are shaded in blue. The next chart just shows some of the comparisons on these key indicators to the national average. EETC does a survey each year of about 8,000 to 10,000 residents. More than 1,000 of them live in U.S. cities with more than 250,000 residents. And that's where we get this national large city average you see. And you'll see that when it comes as a place to live, as a place to work, and as a place to raise children, Fort Worth rates significantly above the national average. You're more in line when it comes to as a place to retire, actually a little below the Texas average, but definitely when it comes to a place to live and a place to work, you're setting the standard. And that's just the average. One of the things that we found is cities that do surveys tend to outperform all cities because a lot of cities don't care or they just don't want to know. So this next chart actually shows how you stack up to some individual cities, some of which are the best performers in our database. I've got like Raleigh and Virginia Beach, which are 2 of the highest rated surveys in our database. I've also got some of the Texas cities that we have surveyed as well in here. And your full reports have a complete set of these so you can see for yourself. So part of this is just to let you know, well, how do you stack up against cities in Texas that are large? Where could you be if you were trying to set the national standard? And that's what you show here. And you can see overall, you generally are on par with this group of peer cities, though your overall rating compared to the nation as a whole is much, much better. So if you go to the next chart, just get to item number 3, which is overall satisfaction with most of your services, in addition to perceptions of the community, is above the national average. And you see that on this following chart. You'll notice that most of the items here, everything with the quality you see of your fire services, you can see library services, water and sewer services, parks and recreation, and your communication are all above the national average. You're particularly strong when it comes to customer service, which I mentioned before, you've actually improved while most of the rest of the nation has declined, and also your communication. You can see that your communication is at 44% compared to a national average of just 24, and your customer service is at 55 compared to a national average of just 32. So you're doing really, really well in those areas. On the other hand, though, you'll notice where some of the areas you trail slightly or below, that's traffic flow, the second one to the bottom. You'll see the maintenance issues. You'll see you're at 25 compared to the average of 28. And you can see when it comes to code enforcement or issues that have something to do with the appearance of the city is also slightly below the national average. But all in all, you continue to perform well, even though we've seen some declines since the last survey. So if you go to the next chart, this actually shows the overall ratings for customer service citywide. And again, like with the quality of overall ratings for the city as a place to live, you'll notice that the average is pretty consistent. And this is important because when I first did this survey for Fort Worth back in 2002, there were only about 550,000 residents. Now you have nearly 1 million residents. And with all that growth, you've continued to provide good quality customer service to residents in all parts of the city. And that's something, again, that's very impressive from my perspective. If you go to the next chart, it just shows you the fourth thing to remember. And these are really the takeaways or the priorities. You know, one of the reasons you do the survey isn't just to find out how well you're doing, but what do residents think the top priority should be? And street maintenance, traffic flow, police, and appearance-related issues are at the top of the list, and things that I think will have the biggest impact to help you improve satisfaction moving forward. And you can see that in this next chart, where we actually asked residents what were the highest overall priorities. And you can see the top 2 things on the list clearly have to do with perceptions related to maintenance of streets and the overall quality of public safety. You can see those really stand out much higher than the others, followed by traffic flow. And then you can see code enforcement, water and sewer services, parks and recreation are all about the same. And one of the analytic tools that we take a look at is not just the importance or just the satisfaction. We actually put these together to give you some recommendations. And what I felt was interesting is some of the areas that were most important were actually the areas you rated lower compared to the national average or just slightly above the average. And so the things that are most important are truly some opportunities to do better. And if you look at the next chart, we've actually got a table that shows what your importance rating is, what the satisfaction rating is, and we use this to identify what your greatest opportunities for improvement. And you can see maintenance of streets, traffic flow, public safety are really the 3 areas that I'd recommend you emphasize the most. And then you can see followed with things related to code enforcement, satisfaction with your roadway delivery, and parks and recreation. And this is for those of you who are left brain learners and like a list from which one's the best to which one's the least as far as opportunities for improvement. If you're more right brained and you like kind of visuals, if we go to the next chart, this is similar information. But what it shows is from left to right is how important each of the items are and how satisfied folks are from the bottom to top. And what we're looking for here again is the things in the bottom right quadrant. These are things where you're getting lower ratings, that things are important. Again, street maintenance, traffic flow, and code compliance. But I want to highlight public safety. You're doing relatively well, but it's really, really important to folks. And you can see also water, sewer, parks and recreation are those areas you should probably make sure you continue to do well in. Next chart is just really gives you a couple of the final things that I wanted to pull up, just some of the specifics. If you get into the report, we've actually got some details within each category. So when it comes to maintenance, the specific things really are street maintenance and traffic flow. With police services, issues related to crime prevention and police visibility. When it comes to code compliance and such as the cleanliness of streets and litter control. And those are the things that really I think will have the biggest impact moving forward if you're to make improvements in those areas. Last thing I want to let you take away from on the next chart is just the impact that age is having. This is actually something we're seeing nationally and some of the polarizing views, but it's perhaps the most biggest polarizing category I found in the survey. In fact, if you look at the next chart, you can actually see how age of younger folks who are adults age 18 to 34 rated things compared to adults over 65. And you'll see when it comes to value for taxes and fees, there's a 24% differential. When it comes to quality of city services, it's a 20% differential. When it comes to even views of how the people rate the city as a place to live, raise children, work, and retire, you see there's substantial differentials, especially when it comes as a place to retire. And last one, you'll see that of all the city services that were assessed, the biggest differentials were on police services and information. And I share that with you that it's not necessarily unique to Fort Worth. We're seeing this nationwide. But if the city's not addressing this, the people who are 18 to 34 will become 40 to 44. And next thing you know, you'll see declining satisfaction over time because lower or younger people are having different expectations from the community than perhaps older residents. And so merging those together, figuring out how to respond to both groups effectively, I think will be important for the city's future. So last slide is just some of the other findings that we had for the survey. We had a few questions that weren't really related to performance, but we did ask some questions about whether or not people volunteer. And you'll notice that the volunteerism in Fort Worth is significantly higher than the national average. It's 23.2% nationally report volunteering at least 1 hour a month. You can see it's more than a third, 36% in Fort Worth. A couple other things that we looked at on the next chart are just whether or not people support various city initiatives. And you can see when it comes to supporting an expansion of the preservation of open space in the city, and also you can see when it comes to the pursuing the initiatives. My screen just went blank, but you can see what's on that chart. I just lost the slide. But bottom line is there's high level of support for both of these initiatives that were assessed on the survey. And I think we're getting close to the last slides in the presentation.
You're on
These
the
are
last
just
one.
some of the, so my slide came back up. We asked some people about their support or interest in different types of development. And you can see what was particularly interesting is though single family subdivision was the one that was picked #1 by most people, there was significant interest in mixed use developments of different kinds. And so I found that interesting when you actually look at the sum of the top 3 choices. And then finally, just to wrap things up for the survey, kind of takes us back to the 5 things. I know there's a lot of information in this report. You're going to get lots of maps. There's lots of crosstabs. But at the end of the day, nationally, we're seeing things decline. Fort Worth has declined similarly to what we've seen nationally, but at a slightly lower rate. So you're actually outperforming the nation. Residents continue to have a fairly positive perception of the city. And frankly, you're setting the standard in a lot of service areas, but the areas where you're not setting the standard or trailing actually are some of the areas that are most important to your residents, and that's your street maintenance, traffic flow, cleanliness of the city, and so forth. And I just want to encourage the city to be looking at ways to engage younger adults. I think that's going to be really important. A lot of times it may be a race issue, it may be a geography issue, but really from my perspective, the difference in age is perhaps the biggest thing the city is going to have to be managing moving forward. And if you don't, you'll probably see decline satisfaction in the future just because younger adults have different expectations than older ones do. So with that, I will pause. I don't know if there's any other questions, but it's great to have a chance to be with you again.
No questions? Great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Amethyst, did you have anything that you needed to close with there?
No, we'll have the rest of the information to you this week, your map results, and we also have access to an interactive dashboard. So we're happy to sit down with your district directors and kind of show you how to use that so you can really dig in at the district levels and get you more information that's helpful.
Thank you. Next up is a presentation on street maintenance funding. Jess is going to kick us off. Maybe that's appropriate considering the presentation we just had. Did you do that on purpose,
I
Jess?
could not have teed this up any better, but I really appreciate Amethyst and the team for doing the community survey results right before. So really, we started on this a little over a year ago. Staff started looking at how can we increase funding for street maintenance? And that's really coming in response to many questions and many asks of you, council, because we know that it is a need that we have here in the city. And obviously, we saw it in the community survey from 2023 that this is one of the top priorities for the city moving forward. So I've got a great team with me here today that's going to present for us. Oh, there we go. I've got Amethyst. I don't have Amethyst. I don't know what I'm talking about. I have Lane Zarate with TPW Assistant Director over Street Maintenance and Operations. She's going to talk about a lot of the steps we've taken already to date in trying to address street maintenance. She's going to talk about the condition of our streets and really some of the challenges that we have currently facing us. We also have, why do I keep saying Amethyst? I'm so sorry. We also have Christiane Simmons, our Chief Transformation Officer with the Fort Worth Lab, and she's going to talk about a lot of the different funding mechanisms that are available to cover street maintenance and what we're finding as some of the best recommendations going forward. And then we also have Trey Shanks, who's with Friesen Nichols, and he's going to talk to us as well about some of the recommendations and just some of the analytical work that their company has done on behalf of the city of Fort Worth. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over, and we have a lot of great information for you. At the end, we will have an opportunity to ask questions as well.
Thank you, Jess. And council, I think rather than wait to the end of questions with this presentation, it may make sense to ask along the way. So I'll try to watch you, and if you have questions, we'll get to those immediately.
And that was dedicated for street maintenance in the amount of $14.5 million. In 2017, we implemented our ViewWorks payment management system. And this is the software that we use to house all of our data and keep updated. In 21, we collected our most recent citywide condition assessment on our entire street network, which is 8,100 lane miles. In 22, we developed our Fort Worth decision tree for street treatment assessment. So this allows us to select the proper procedure based on a lot of different variables in order to allow us to do modeling and assessments quickly. And then in 23, we developed our ability to do condition forecasting and funding scenario planning. And most recently in 24, the city manager increased our PAYGO funding again, significantly by 9% to the current $28.3 million budget that we have today. So all of this work that we've been doing has been in line with our target of optimizing our asset management. The challenge that we have is that this target keeps moving on us, both with growth and with population increase. The graph on the left just shows visually the increase in population that the city of Fort Worth has been undergoing, and it is projected to continue increasing. And so this population increase results in additional development, additional assets that we need to maintain, and more demand for services citywide. The graph on the right is a representation of our price increasing. The streets PAYGO funding is shown in the orange bar graph there, and our contract cost is shown in the green line there. So while we have been increasing our PAYGO allocation, we have not been increasing it fast enough to keep up with our contract costs. So our money isn't going as far as it used to. So both of these issues together really compound each other and leave us where we are today. This is our current road conditions for the city of Fort Worth. And what we've done is we've taken our normal, very colorful map and we've simplified it to just 3 colors. These represent different categories of streets. So our gray streets need preservation. We have 3,200 lane miles with a pavement condition index score above 85. So these are the good streets. We have orange streets, which need maintenance. We have over 3,000 lane miles that have a PCI below 85, but above 50. And this is where we typically spend our maintenance dollars annually, our $28.3 million.
Then we also have our red streets. So these need reconstruction. These are 1,800 lane miles that are below a 50 PCI. These primarily need to compete for bond funds because they're more expensive projects, and some of them need to really be brought up to standard with new curb and gutter. This requires design and a longer duration to deliver. And so in order to optimize our maintenance dollars, we don't fund the bond qualifying work. So I want to talk a little bit more about our focused area of need for maintenance, which is our orange category of streets. As I said before, we have about 3,000 lane miles that are below 85 and above 50. So just think about the distance of that. If you have one lane of pavement stretching 3,000 miles, that's a lot to maintain. And we know that below 85, we're going to start having, oh, yes, you have a question?
Just for purpose of discussion, could you remind everyone the approximate cost of 1 lane mile of road today?
To construct it brand new from scratch, I mean, we're probably looking at $2 million. Is that what you would say, Lauren? I mean, it depends on whether it's a local small street or if it's a major arterial, of course. But that's a good round number for you, yeah. So as I was saying, below 85, we know that water is able to penetrate those surface distresses. And once it does, it starts actively undermining our pavement and our integrity of the road. And then that starts to spread more quickly. So that leads to the next point, which is that in this orange category of maintenance, we have the fastest rate of deterioration. Whether it's an asphalt street or a concrete street, the degradation curve for a street has a steep section right in the middle of its life. And so that falls within this orange category as well. It also contains the majority of our vital segments to fund. This is a term, vital, that is related to the timing of that work being performed in order to minimize our costs, right? Because per our decision tree, we could do it now at a lower cost versus if we wait a year or 2 years, it's going to be a more expensive procedure. And then anything that we don't fund that is vital basically rolls down into red and becomes an additional street in our bond backlog. So our city staff did our own estimate, and we determined that we probably have about 30% with our PAYGO funding of what we need to address the vital segments. So we know our bond backlog is growing, and in order to visualize that, what we did is a current budget scenario forecast. So I'm going to start with our base map that we already showed you before of our current PCIs mapped into these 3 categories. I want to draw your attention to the fact that right now our orange and red streets are primarily inside the loop with a lot of gray, newer concrete development outside of the loop. And our average PCI score right now is a 72 citywide, which many of you might think is a, if you're in school, it's a passing grade. But it's important to understand that that is an average that is skewed by the amount of new development that we have. If we look at just our asphalt condition citywide, it's a 56. Our concrete is almost 90. So that's where the 72 comes in. So with the budget scenario forecast, what we do is we apply our current maintenance dollars, which increase at 4% per year, to the vital segments to fund. And anything that doesn't get funded out of that, we let continue to deteriorate along the degradation curve. And if we apply our maintenance dollars for the next 10 years, the resulting PCIs we can map, which is this map here. So you can see 10 years from now, we're looking at more red within the loop. We're also looking at newer streets up on the north that are going below 85, some of which are already going below 50. The average PCI at this point, based on our calculation, would be a 62. However, the asterisk next to that is important because it's reminding me to tell you that We cannot factor into that average, predicting where new development would also occur, which would, of course, not be included in that average. We also can't predict where our bond dollars will go to reconstruct the red streets, which would also affect the average. So now, 10 years from now, with the amount of orange that we have, I think what we're about to show is that steeper rate of deterioration from orange to red. If we apply our maintenance dollars plus 4%, year 20 looks like that. A lot of our streets are below 50 PCI. Even the streets up on the north. And when you consider that a concrete street has a surface life of about 30 to 40 years, that starts to make a little more sense that those streets in year 2045 would be below 50. They would be in the last half of their life. So the story that this tells is kind of twofold. First, it tells the story that our current maintenance funding is not sufficient to prevent deterioration of our average score. And then it also tells the story that the impact of deferred maintenance and underfunding maintenance reaches everyone in the city, not just where we currently have the worst conditioned streets in our network. So our leadership in TPW really recognized the need to act quickly and asked us to outsource an independent analysis. So we have consulted Freeze & Nichols, and I'm gonna introduce you to Trey Shanks here. He is the Infrastructure Management and Financial Strategies Group Leader. And their scope was to provide us an independent analysis using our current data to identify our funding need, and then to also provide us some expertise with these funding options and support our decision-making. So Trey is gonna talk about his methodology for his analysis and his results.
Thank you, Lane. I'll talk about a couple of slides quickly and turn over to Christiane, then I'll come back and talk to you about some of the detailed findings of things. So I really want to, on this slide, just visualize what Lane was just telling you about. If you take a road, or really any asset, but we're talking about roads here, you build it, over time it's going to age and it's going to get in worse and worse condition, right? If you do nothing, at some point it fails and you'd need to replace it. And so if you did that, that backlog that Lane was talking about is the cost for reconstruction. This is an example here, reconstruct it, and that's your life cycle of that roadway. And what you see there on the table on the left is that total cost over that time. You got your average condition and the like for that. Really what we're getting at with this though is how do you not just spend more money, but how do you spend money differently? How do you get more out of the money you spend on your roadways? So the green is an example of doing those maintenance activities, okay? So we're talking about, say, crack seal, and it's still in good condition. It may not visibly look like it needs maintenance. It's just like your car. You don't wait until your car's rattling to change the oil. You change it to preventative approach. So that's what a crack seal, a surface seal do. They keep it in that better condition over a longer period of time at a cheaper cost than reconstruction. At some point, the road will still fail and need to be reconstructed, but this extends the life. And you can see the benefit, one, in lower cost over the whole life between maintenance and reconstruction dollars, and that the condition of the road is in better shape on average over time as well. So there's a better experience with the road. So what we've done is we took the city's data. You've got a lot of data, a lot of information related to your roads. We took the condition assessments that have been done for the city. We've taken the maintenance actions. It's a list of the different types of maintenance treatments that are done, what those costs are for those maintenance actions, and what the benefit of those. How do those improve or maintain or extend the life of the roadways? We applied that to all the road segments in the city and identified those green actions, or what we would call preservation actions. Those are lower cost when it's in, they really apply when it's still in really good condition. And the heavier maintenance is kind of like your major tune-up. that is more expensive, but still less expensive than full reconstruction. And for 2024, identified what those recommended actions would be and the associated costs for that. Relative to your current funding, you see that there's an additional about 59 million, excuse me, 59 million for this year for that. But really taking that over a 5-year look, what you see is there's about 66.1 million on average that's needed in additional funding for your street maintenance to extend the life of your roadways, to have them in better condition, and to minimize them going to need for reconstruction. Okay, I'll turn over to Christiane.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So we thought that at this point in the discussion, it would be prudent for the Fort Worth Lab to give a quick reminder on where we stand today with street maintenance funding, as well as some other mechanisms that have been discussed as options in order to introduce the concept of what a street maintenance fee might look like. So as you know, this is a reminder, the city carves out a portion of its tax rate in order to fund capital on a cash basis. We call that pay-go, pay as you go. And a lot of what that funds is maintenance. So as you can see, I'm gonna sort of just snapshot fiscal year 24 for the purpose of this discussion. So in fiscal year 24, our current budget year, the total pay-go allocation across all the programs is 76 million. So of that 76 million, 28 million is dedicated to street maintenance. So that's almost 40% of the pay-go property tax allocation that's spent on street maintenance currently. So as you can sort of infer from that, that means any desired increase in funding for street maintenance would require, hypothetically, right, decreasing one of the other pay-go areas. So in orange, you see streets maintenance. The other yellow shaded bars, if you can see those, are other transportation related pay-go buckets. So things like signals, sidewalks, bridges. And then in blue are all the non-TPW pay-go buckets. So things like parks and neighborhood improvement programs, facilities, IT. And so that's just sort of the trade-off, right, of maybe increasing within our existing pay-go allocation. So another way to look at this, to state it a bit differently. So again, total pay-go allocation, 76 million. So that's 7 cents of the tax rate. You remember that 7 cents that we sort of carve out of the O&M rate. That's where we get our 76 million. Current street maintenance funding in that allocation, 28 million or 2.5 cents. The additional need for street maintenance that we just saw in Trey's slide was 59 million in fiscal year 24, which would mean an additional 5.4 cents in pay-go. So, oh, there's my little animation. I forgot that was there. Thank you. So what that means is a tax rate, hypothetically, tax rate increase of 5.4 cents to meet that need that we just saw, or perhaps more reasonably, a decrease from other pay-go programs, or other general fund departments that are funded in that O&M portion of the tax rate in order to shift more dollars to pay-go. So then you're starting to talk about shifting money from things like police or fire, other parts of TPW, economic development, parks, et cetera. So that very sky-high bar is just to show, if we added what we need, according to this analysis, in streets maintenance, and left all the others the same, we're way exceeding the total dollars that are currently allocated to pay-go. So, in addition to property tax as the current funding source of street maintenance, there are often other funding mechanisms that are brought up or questioned as alternatives. So the first of those here is bonds. Bonds are a great option for growth and infrastructure. They're not eligible for maintenance purposes. And as you know, bonds require voter approval. Another thing that's great but not eligible for maintenance purposes is transportation impact fees. So the city does levy those. Again, those are limited to growth and capacity needs. Sales tax, big revenue source in the general fund, as we know, definitely eligible for maintenance, but again, we begin then talking about requiring that revenue offset to other general fund departments. And as you know, we already have dedicated sales tax funding streams for CCPD and transit. And then TxDOT, the COG, the county often have transportation-related programs, and some of those do have a maintenance focus. But again, when it comes to a continued funding stream, the availability of those ebbs and flows. And so that's a bit unreliable with regard to continued maintenance needs. So then we've covered property tax, and so then we're left with discussion of potentially a street maintenance fee. So a street maintenance fee, as you can tell by the name, is eligible for maintenance. It's a stable revenue stream that would be dedicated to existing roadways. And we'll talk a bit about how it would, be set up, but it's a monthly fee based on proportional use of traffic. It's traffic generation, proportional use of the roadway system. It does not require a public vote. It is a council level approval and implementation. So this is not the first time that a street maintenance fee has been discussed. It's not a new concept for the city of Fort Worth. Back in 2010, there was a task force, the Blue Ribbon Task Force, that looked at transportation funding gaps. And as part of that plan, they recommended adoption of the street maintenance fee. In their report, if you know their report, it was called a transportation user fee. So those are interchangeable for today. But that group identified the fee as an ongoing way to provide continued maintenance funding. But as you can see there, we've sort of marked that that was something that, it obviously did not get adopted. So what is it? A street maintenance fee is a charge to property occupants for their proportional share of the cost to maintain the street system. So again, it's been called a transportation user fee here in the city before. It's also adopted in some other places as a road maintenance fee or a road user fee. But the typical characteristics are that it's based on vehicle trips and by land use. It's an ongoing fee that you typically would see on the water bill, utility bill. And the fee revenue is dedicated to transportation purposes. It's a continued stream of funding for that purpose. And this is to confirm that it is legal to do this. Hopefully I wouldn't be talking to you otherwise. But we are, you'll see in a moment that some other cities have already implemented these, and we'd be able to do so as well under our home rule authority. So there's language there referenced in the charter on our ability to maintain all things public works and to levy and collect fees for local improvements. In comparing those two main funding options that we talked about, there are a couple of key differences to highlight. So the street maintenance funding for maintenance, whereas property tax is sort of competing for all those departments. You're really familiar with the competing needs for property tax funding. On the street maintenance fee side, the revenue needs can be addressed through fee adjustments at your level again. And you do rate setting annually for the property tax too, but then there's complications, right, with state law regulating increases to the tax rate or how much growth we can capture. And then the street maintenance fee allows for an exemption of non-users of the street system. On the property tax side, obviously you're familiar that there are exemptions there too, but those are not related to use or non-use. So those are just a couple of key differences. And then with regard to being a fee and not a tax, I won't read all these, but the fee is calculated to establish the connection between what it costs to maintain the roadway systems and use of the roadway system. And the fee would apply to all developed properties, including those exempt from property tax. And then again, there's an appeal process that would permit those who have a case for not using the roadway system. Maybe they say, I don't have a car, like I'm not using the streets, or you're a property owner that has a building, but it's vacant, so it's not drawing traffic to you. There's a mechanism for exempting property owners, but typically applied to all developed properties. And then that dedicated stream only used for roadway maintenance. And this is just a quick look at some of the other cities in Texas who have already implemented a street maintenance fee. So you see Austin started back in 1992 with the most recent city looking at this, Waco. They're in the middle of an implementation now. And later in the presentation, I think you'll see sort of where a proposed methodology stacks up against some of these cities. But this is just a quick snapshot of sort of who has these now. And with that, I think I'm turning it back over to Trey, unless you have any questions for me.
Any questions? No, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to run through some of the specifics of how do we get to a fee and what the a considered fee might be with that. As we talk on the right of how do you identify what an appropriate street user fee would be per property. Think of it, as comparable to on the left with your water system. You've got a meter that measures your amount of water use. Fort Worth has a stormwater utility fee that's measured based off of the amount of what's called impervious area that causes additional runoff. For street maintenance, think of it from a standpoint of measuring the amount of traffic generated, okay, and the trips generated. So an example calculation of that is factors a variety of considerations, okay? So one is the land use itself, okay? So type, is single-family residential, is it industrial, is it commercial, retail, and the like. And then using industry standard information from what's called the Institute of Transportation Engineers. There's industry standard information, what's called a trip generation manual that identifies the number of trips and the length of trips on average for different types of property use. And to develop what's called vehicle miles traveled based off of that land use. There's different factors that go into that. There's different property characteristics that I'll show in just a minute that factor for that. So in simply, single-family residential would all be treated the same, okay? A business would be treated differently based off of the size of the business. So I'll have examples to show of that in just a minute. Okay, so shifting a little bit from the condition aspect that Lane was talking about earlier and the decreasing condition of roads, you see that blue line on the left is representation over time at your current funding for street maintenance, what the condition of the roads will be over time. What we've analyzed is what would it take to be able to maintain your road condition, where it is, what level of funding would be necessary for that with that optimized maintenance approach that we talked about when I was up a second ago. So that $66.1 million of additional annual funding, what that would get to allocated across the community would be this rate schedule here, building off of the 2010 task force initial recommendations. So this is the same structure as what was initially proposed in 2010 that council considered at the time, just adjusted for the growth and the increased funding needs. So what you're seeing is for a single family residence, $9.22 per month. For apartment complexes, it'd be $5.65 per apartment unit, okay? So where that's assessed, overall to the apartment complex and allocated out. And then the rest of them, what you see is, so for office, retail, commercial, dining, industrial, and institutional, it varies by rate based off of different trip generation, as I talked about, based off those different types of classes. But they're all based off of, per property, the square footage of the building area, okay? So, and I have examples I'll show here in just a minute to give you some real world examples. But you see a range from as low as 267 per 1,000 square feet for industrial, where there's not a lot of traffic generation, to retail, commercial, dining, 1,580, 1,206 per 1,000 square feet. So that's per 1,000 square feet of building area. Any questions before I move on from that one?
Carlos.
Maybe more of a comment. You alluded to council back then at 2010, considering that task force's recommendations. I remember that when it started in 2008. At the time, it was more geared to new development north of the loop. Didn't really talk about, funding sources for inside the loop where you have older streets, right? Because now we're talking about maintenance. Back then, we called it, a user fee, right? It was that type of user fee. So I see that difference right there. I'm not going to go through like those recommended numbers right there. I see single family residential, right? And there are differences depending on where you are in the city, when it comes to that rate. So I might have some questions later on there, but I know this is all dependent on the rate at which you address your maintenance, concerns. Otherwise, you'll never catch up.
That's correct. And I guess one point of clarification, sometimes this gets confused with what's called your impact fee. Mm-hmm. So that impact fee is that one-time charge for development. This is that ongoing monthly user fee. Right, yeah. That's exactly right. Yep. Okay. Okay. So as Christiane alluded to, we provided a comparison relative to other cities in comparable cities in Texas of what their user fee is. Every one of them has a different rate structure. And so for residential, though, you see that Fort Worth is at the lower end of that spectrum. And then there's variable approaches that are taken on the commercial, the non-residential side. But there's a wide variation there. And again, Waco's is pending this year implementation. So one of the things we want to look at is to see, well, what's that total impact to the average residential utility bill? And so if you see here, you see a typical monthly utility bill for Fort Worth, Dallas, Corpus Christi, and Austin. So factoring water, wastewater, the street maintenance fee, stormwater fee if they have it. You'll notice that Dallas doesn't have a street maintenance fee. Corpus and Austin do. Fort Worth still compares favorably, even with the street maintenance fee, to all of those comparisons. Okay, so I'll go through some of those examples from those earlier rate, that earlier rate table there. So this is an example of a small business dining fast food facility. And so what you see is that rate is at $15.80 per 1,000 square feet, and the monthly fee would be about $46 and change, for that. Okay, so that factors a lot of trips, relatively short trips for a fast food restaurant would be the way that would be factored in. So shifting to a big box example, this would be a large commercial retail facility, but common throughout the city. And so different category, but also a lot more square footage, a lot more traffic generated. That fee would be about $1,457 is the way this example would show. A large industrial example, so a lot lower traffic generation, so significantly lower traffic generation, but also it's important to note that it also factors the type of traffic, the heavy traffic component, heavy vehicle traffic component of that. That fee, monthly fee would be estimated at $28.74 for that large industrial facility. And so that building is over 1 million square feet for reference. Okay, and then this church example would fall under the institutional classification. And now you see this is a large church, 133,000 square feet of building area, right? So that's key. It's not the overall property area, and it's not factoring other aspects. It's that building area, and that fee would be $362 a month. So, and next one, apartments. Again, noting that it's per unit. So in this example, there's nearly 300 apartment units at $5.65 per unit. So that would be, for the overall complex, $1,684 per month. So for each unit would be $5.65. And I believe there's one or two more. So a high school example, this has 230,000 square feet of impervious area, and this would be an institutional category, so monthly fee of about $630. For reference, for Fort Worth ISD, the cumulative number of properties we identify as a little over 240 properties. That'd be about $24,000 a month in aggregate for Fort Worth ISD. Fort Worth, cumulative, of all properties, there's over $12.9 million, 12.9 million square feet of building area at that institutional rate of $2.71 per 1,000 square feet would be $35,000 a month for the street user fee. I'm just going to pull this all the way up. Okay, so a key summary aspect of this is on the left is the graph showing that we showed before about condition. The blue line shows your current funding levels, and it's showing condition decreasing over time. The purple shows what the condition is if it's funded at the proposed level. On the right shows the impact to your bond funding needs. That at the blue level of funding, your bond needs, the amount of road network going to reconstruction, needing reconstruction, is going to increase significantly over the next 5 years. Whereas we identify they'll maintain relatively flat over the next 5 years if you're able to fully implement the maintenance actions. Down there at the bottom, you see that kind of summary of the significant difference in costs of the preservation funding, $4,000 to $28,000, 200 to say 500,000 for the heavier maintenance, but you get into the millions for the reconstruction. Okay, so the key is that what I talked earlier about different funding. That's the idea. Is proper maintenance funding minimizes the demand on your bond funding needs. So this example, status quo versus the proposed approach would be the difference of additional 650 lane miles worth of road network that would fall into that reconstruction category, about 5 bond programs worth of reconstruction. And I'll turn over to Jess to finish it out.
All right, Mayor and Council. So what I want to do is talk about if this is something that you want to continue exploring, what that potential path forward can look like. And one of the things I want to just reiterate is the figures that you saw, those are the preliminary estimates based on the previous work that's been done and the desired funding goals. Along the way, we have a lot more work to do to flesh out these numbers and really determine, Council, what is it that you want to see. There are lots of other options like a phased-in approach or certain categories that we can look at. So just keep that in the back of your mind as well. We're here today because, as staff, we are about to start on the budget preparation process for the next fiscal year. So this timing is great to know that if this is something that you want to move forward again, we have a lot of work to do ahead of us. So number one, there needs to be a lot of stakeholder engagement. We need the feedback from those that would be impacted to understand, is this supported in the community? What does it look like? And bring that back to you. We would begin that right after this work session if you want us to keep going forward, and we anticipate bringing that feedback back to you in August. And I would imagine that stakeholder would also be looking at the model, the financial figures that Freeze and Nichols will determine as we work through. We would keep this in the back of our minds as we plan for that fiscal year 25 budget. We would start thinking through what would this look like to execute. So we would also determine what is the timing of that revenue coming in, what is the timing then of the ramp up of the program and the expenditures going out. Again, if we choose to move forward, one option would be to adopt this ordinance in October of 2024, so just this year. In the back of your minds, there's a lot of work to do also on the billing integration side. And so what does it look like to incorporate this onto the utility bill? There's a lot of data validation that would need to occur, so a lot of steps to take. And then finally, we could begin collecting this fee as early as the fall of this year, again, tied to the adoption of the new budget year. With that, I'm available to answer any questions as well as our team.
Thank you, Jess. Elizabeth.
First, I really want to thank TPW and staff for bringing this to us. I'm sure that this wasn't easy to present a true accurate status of where we are as a city. And quite frankly, it doesn't look great. When you go back to those maps, I can't see gray because all I see are yellow, orange, and red. And that's not just for the historically older parts of the city, but I see that across our map as well. And so we definitely have some work to do, and we have to figure out how we get there. And so I appreciate you bringing this to us. I have some questions and concerns, and the first one being our transportation impact fee. We are proposing to levy an additional fee on our residents, our single-family homeowners, our businesses that exist today, when we don't make developers pay for the actual cost of their development. We are still subsidizing that. And so that's going to be a hard sell for me to take back to my residents and say, we're going to charge you $9.22, or we'll call it $10 a month, when we aren't charging the developers when we're subsidizing them. So if we can subsidize folks wanting to come to this city, we should certainly think about what that looks like for the people already in the city. So my challenge to you is to go back and look at that transportation impact fee as well. I'm not saying throw this baby out with the bathwater, but I think it's only fair that we do that before we start adding fees on. I appreciate the walkthrough of who pays what and how. I still don't know that I can look you in the face and tell you I understand that calculation and how I got there, or how y'all got there. When I look at the rates of users by comparison, it just feels, the gut check that I have is that we're doing $9.22 for single family, but then you see some uses that intuitively we know cause more traffic, that have a rate that's not much higher. And so I don't think it's a critique on your work. I think when I look at that, it doesn't intuitively make sense to me. And so that could just be me being dense, or that could be that it just doesn't pass that initial smell test when we go out to people. And so I think we need to do something. I think we have to do something. And I'm open to dialogue about this plan, but I think I would definitely need some additional information before we move forward. And serving on your mobility committee, this wasn't brought to us before. It was brought to us collectively here on council. And I think that was a mistake, that it should have come to us first so that we could have better vetted it out then.
Gina.
I thought I was going to just supplement what Elizabeth was talking about, but you took away my concern about coming to mobility first. It should have come to mobility first, but I can tell you, I offer nothing but compliments to you and your team. This is the first time I've seen such a thorough foundation helping us understand what we have to make decisions about. I've had a couple of peers ask me, well, what do you think? Well, my response today was, I think nothing today. It's going to take a while to absorb the entire package. But kudos to you, Jessica. Kudos to you, Lauren. Anytime you bring freezer nickels in the house, you're going to get accurate information. And so thank you for being able to at least set the table for this discussion to begin. And I would ask that you guys get to mobility as soon as you can. But it's good presentation.
Carlos, and then Chris.
Just got lots to absorb there. Thank you for presenting. Just a couple of things that I would like to get some more information on. When it comes to the SMF rate structure and rates, I would like a breakdown how you calculated those. And then in addition, let's see, I lost my place. I think when it comes to what we have in terms of, when it comes to maintenance actions, right? We have a set of in-house capabilities here at DPW that we can do that, and then we outsource, or contract out the rest. I'd like to know currently what we have, right? In-house, what we outsource,
Okay.
what we contract for.
That would be great. And if I could share one other tidbit in response to the rate structure, fully agree, we can bring a lot more information to explain that. One of the things that we talked about is how limited, or the fewer number of rate classes that we're proposing. And I'll tell you, we had a little bit of debate around that as well. And we also looked at a lot of the other cities. They all do it differently. And some of the lessons we learned, though, from some of the other cities is the more rate classifications you have, the more convoluted it becomes and hard to implement. So one of those key lessons that we took from the other cities was make it as simple as possible. But that does then make things look off sometimes when you're generalizing an entire group of businesses into a very simplistic category. But again, I talked about we have a lot of work ahead of us still. That can absolutely be one of those things that we study further to see do we need to change it from what we have right now?
One thing I would ask, and I should have when I spoke earlier, as we did with the transportation impact fee, we had a plan in place. We knew where we wanted to, the ultimate number we wanted to get to, but we stair-stepped it there. And so I'd like to also see what a plan to stair-step this, walk us into this fee instead of just starting with the.
Yes,
the-
yeah, and that'll be the work
budget.
that we undertake between now and then. You know, between the consultant, the contract community and our in-house crews, we couldn't possibly triple our operations in 1 year. So it will be a gradual increase. They're already looking at that of, you know, how can we make sure we show people an immediate improvement the first year if this were to go ahead, but also slowly implementing it over a 3 to 5 year period.
Okay, thank you. And again, I just want to say, I know that this was tough to bring today, and I really do appreciate all of the work and your willingness to step outside of the box and figure out a way to get to yes, and just saying, instead of just saying, well, we'll figure it out in the budget or leave it. I'm sure David appreciates that as well. So again, thank you.
They've done a great job. TPW, Friesen Nichols, Fort Worth Lab, they've been working on this for quite some time. So they've really done an outstanding job. A lot of research has gone into this. We know it's still a very big ask and definitely a big decision point.
Chris, did you have something?
Thank you for the presentation. I'm like some of the others. I have some heartburn when it comes to raising fees, especially for our residential, single family. When we recently raised the fees for a trash can, I had a probably 30-minute debate with my papa, 82-year-old man, and I lost. And so he talks about, you know, my income has not changed, and you want me to go down there and push the thing down, or I'm going to be charged more, et cetera, et cetera. And in historic Southside, Highland Hills, Rolling Hills, these are areas that are very populated senior citizens. And so one of the concerns I have, I didn't see it articulated here, is there a different fee for senior citizens who's at a certain age bracket?
I mean, I think that's what we look at going forward, but also the next step would to be a stakeholder committee, which sounds like your pawpaw's getting signed up right now.
You got to pick them up.
Yeah, that's fine. We can partner with Trinity Metro on that. But, you know, really making sure we have a good idea where everyone at in our community could expect to be billed for this. We've also talked about, you know, kind of an application on one address, where you could look at an estimate of the fee based on your particular situation.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And that's just kind of something I'm throwing out there. So going back to the community trying to explain, and I know we're getting ready for our July break. But if we can get something, if this is something we're really considering, we can get something earlier before August. I mean, we got August, and then we go into September, we're getting ready to vote on the budget, and you're talking about an ordinance in October. Those months go pretty quickly. And then I still also want to, I didn't see it in here, you alluded to, I think Friesen Nichols alluded to, money coming out the general fund, possibly, you know, we would have to decrease in what we do for police and what we do for fire, and I'm not advocating for that. But I am advocating for that we should see some type of compromise as it relates to our budget. Not saying that we're just going to, okay, we need more roads or better roads, we're going to tax the taxpayers. But what are we going to do into our budget system? And that's more on the David question. I mean, because I still have heartburn, nothing against District 9, but when we have et cetera funds that's left over, we just choose to relight a bridge for over $2 million, where we actually could use that for other things. And so I think that there's things we have done historically for the city of Fort Worth or for one individual person that we have that has not benefited this city holistically. So those are my comments today.
Jared, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank y'all for the presentation. I particularly appreciated being able to see the magnitude of the challenge we face with infrastructure in the city. I too also have some heartburn. While I appreciate the urgency and the importance of ensuring we have infrastructure. My heartburn comes from a conversation we had last budget cycle about fees. And when our residents pay taxes, they expect that basic services are delivered, and that includes infrastructure, maintaining their streets. And so one of the concerns I have, in regard to that, is the context of how we got there. Elizabeth brought up a really great point about impact fees. We're still not where we want to be, and we're behind on roads because we've subsidized impact fees for so long. We also really been focused on cutting the tax rate for years, and at the expense of not being able to provide adequate infrastructure. Now we're asking our residents to pay more in fees, and so that's a challenge for me. And also, we're sprawling as a city, which is creating this cycle to where we may never catch up, even if we're charging residents and businesses, especially those who are most vulnerable, with an additional fee that makes it harder for them to be able to afford living or doing business in the city of Fort Worth. The other challenge I have with this is that we haven't had a conversation about transit as well, knowing that transit can reduce trip generation. And I can't see us making a bold investment in street maintenance and maintain the roads we have without also being visionary and bold about what investments are we going to do in transit and what are we going to do differently in transit. I know we're all really excited about expanding the rail into the hospital district. And I think that's a huge success that helps reduce trips long term when we have a multimodal transit system. And then the other thing, and this is more of a question, I do want to know how much we are charging residents in monthly fees, because we could be defeating the entire purpose of cutting the tax rate and promising our residents that we're providing property tax relief, but at the same turn charging fees for the same services that we should have been providing as basic services through our general fund and through our typical revenues that residents are paying that expect services to be provided with what they're currently paying.
Good. Councilmember Williams, for clarification, are you talking about their residential utility bill? And then just, are there any other fees that residents are currently paying?
Yeah, all fees, because last budget cycle, last time we looked at the list of fees, most of the fees that we had as a city went up last budget cycle. And now we're talking about adding an additional fee. I mean, I don't know the dollar amount. I can't go back to my residents and say how much they're paying in fees. And so I would like to know how much our residents are paying in monthly fees, so I can better understand what an additional fee would do. It's a really hard time for our residents. And so, and especially for our businesses, I'm a finance chair in my church. And so talking about impact, user fees for churches as well, that gives me heartburn knowing that churches do the very best they can with the generous offerings that people present to the Lord to try to do good work in our community and to provide that offering for user fees like this. I know a number of churches in my district who would not be able to do that. And so I'm more concerned about fees in general.
And just to add to that, as you roll out the question I had about senior citizens, I think it might be important for nonprofits that has a 501c3 status, a 501c4, if there is some type of decrease exemption, and most churches would fall underneath that, but as well as other nonprofits who are doing work in the community.
All right. Any other questions, council? No. Thank y'all very much for teeing this up. Do you need any other directions? I don't think you've gotten any negative feedback on potential path forwards. I think you've got the green light to proceed and pay close attention to stakeholders that each council member may want you to include. And we've got a few missing people, so make sure that you're briefing them separately if you haven't already.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Mayor, I think it would be helpful also if we brief each council member individually following this. And also, I wholeheartedly support Councilmember Beck and Mayor Pro Tem Bivens' comments about it going to our mobility committee. We have brilliant minds on that. I think it needs a lot more work before we rush this through.
Just for clarity though, Jared, are you good with the timeline that was presented in the presentation? Because I think it articulates what your concern would be. But if you've got additional feedback, you might provide that to Jess offline.
Yeah, totally happy to do that. I think next budget cycle is ambitious. I don't know if we can get there. I'm open to the conversation, but there's a lot of question marks I have at least.
Thank you. Okay, council, next presentation is our annual comprehensive financial report. Finance is fun, Reggie.
Hashtag finance, especially today. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Today I'm here to present the FY23 Annual Financial Report, otherwise known as the ACFR, and you may hear that reference today. I'm joined at the podium by Tony Russo. Tony's the Assistant Director in Finance, and Tony's responsible for all accounting and financial reporting for the city. The presentation will recap all of the associated revenues and expenditures within the FY23 fiscal year, which also includes any short and long-term liabilities that are required to be included in the GAAP basis schedules that you'll see in a minute. Additionally, Tony will review the external audit report that was issued to the audit committee earlier today. The agenda today will briefly cover the purposes of the annual financial report. We'll touch on a couple of accomplishments within finance as well as Fort Worth Lab. We'll touch on briefly financial performance of all of the various funds. And then, as I indicated, Tony will make a few brief comments on the audit. The annual financial report is used by several parties outside of the city. In particular, in addition to mayor and council and residents, granting agencies, in particular bond rating agencies, bondholders and investors pay close attention to every government agency's annual financial report. And the purpose overall of the ACFR is to be transparent as it relates to the use of taxpayer resources and to provide the public with an overall detailed accounting of all revenues and expenditures. Just to touch on a few accomplishments, of course, the unmodified clean opinion from auditors that was received actually this morning, and that's the highest level of assurance from an external audit. The city has received that now for, I believe, 14 consecutive years. In addition, the GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, has awarded the city two distinctions, the Excellence in Financial Reporting, as well as the Distinguished Budget Presentation through the Fort Worth Lab operation. Additionally, the Treasury Office has also received an award for its investment policy, and that's awarded through the Government Treasurers Organization of Texas. And of course, that unit is headed by John Sanford. And we'll briefly touch on financial performance of the various funds. But I think before we start, the reports that are provided within the ACFR are compiled on a GAAP basis, which differs slightly from the budgetary basis schedules that council would typically see periodically from the Fort Worth Lab, or even David Cook recently in January presented some budget basis schedules. And there are major differences between the two types of reports, and it's primarily related to the inclusion of long-term liabilities within the GAAP statements. We are also required to incorporate unrealized gains and losses on investments as well as capital assets. But probably one of the biggest distinctions would be the timing of revenue and expenditure recognition. So those are just some key differences. On an entity-wide basis, the city's ending net position on a GAAP basis is approximately $4.8 billion. That's an increase of approximately $600 million during FY23. That's made up of several categories, primarily increased revenues during the year, a decrease in the OPEB liability, increase in net pension liability, The auditors require us to post an unrealized gain from our investment income, as well as we saw a decrease in expenditures, all told to amount to approximately $600 million increase in the net position of the city. The city's current outstanding bonded debt is approximately $2.4 billion. A billion of that, $1.044 billion, is tied to general obligation debt, which incorporates tax notes, certificates of obligation, as well as the GO bonds that are authorized by voters. The remaining debt is comprised primarily of the water and sewer operation, with currently approximately $1.2 billion of outstanding debt. Just briefly going to the various funds. From the general fund side, we've seen an increase in fund balance of approximately $75 million. That increase was attributable to several factors. Sales taxes were collected over the budget by approximately $21 million. The city overall did an outstanding job managing the budget. Each department takes credit for managing their individual allocations, and we were able to save approximately $24 million from that effort. And then during the year, we came to council with some additional investment income, which were allocated to some very specific purposes during the year. And that's the result of a dramatic increase in interest rates that we're all aware of. And we are basically subject to those additional windfall of revenues based on investment income, which isn't technically put into the budget on an annual basis. Typically, investment income for general operations are used and transferred over to the debt service fund. This slide simply provides a crosswalk of budgetary basis schedules that actually were presented to council back in, I believe, in January, and then the various adjustments required to get to the final gap basis schedules for the city. Culture and tourism, again, had a significant rebound as it relates to hotel tax collections as well as ticket tax increases, primarily over at Dickies Arena. CCPD, again, had an excellent year. This data has previously been presented to council. Increased its fund balance by approximately $12.5 million, and that's attributable to sales tax collections and, again, excellent management over the budget, saving approximately 9% of the budget, or $8.4 million. Risk financing, one of the areas that we are really paying attention to. This program actually ended the year with a negative net position of $18.6 million. There were several factors that caused an increase in the deficit in this fund. It actually increased, the negative deficit actually increased by $6.2 million. The fund has $39 million in cash for any current year liabilities and expenses, including any insurance deductibles that might be needed. The significant net position is primarily the result of having to account for all of the long-term future liabilities within the risk fund. And we'll get into a little more detail in a subsequent slide. Water and sewer ended the year with approximately $3.2 billion of net position, an increase of $253 million. And again, this is on a GAAP basis, which incorporates some non-cash adjustments, but once again, an excellent year for
Reggie,
water and
pause there. I
sewer.
think Councilmember Blaylock has a question. You want to wait till, okay, keep going, Reggie, sorry.
Okay. But again, these are GAAP bases, which incorporates several of the long-term liabilities that I referenced earlier. Pension. I know this is always of interest. On a GAAP basis, the annual financial report requires that we establish a net pension liability based on a very specific calculation that's required by the accounting standards. And it's primarily based on the fund value at a point in time. Basically, the data is 1 year behind the actuarial report that we are planning to receive at the retirement board is planning to receive at the end of April, and then subsequently shared with council at its joint council retirement board meeting. And I believe that meeting is set for at some point early to mid-May. I don't have the exact date. And then it's at that meeting we will receive the calendar 23 actuarial report. But as it relates to the government, the required accounting that's embedded into the ACFR, the total pension liability actually increased a bit per the calculation of approximately $473 million. But again, the actuarial report is pending, and we're really excited to see the results of calendar year 23's activity. And as you know, the pension fund is required to have a 30-year amortization period. It currently sits at 36 years and potentially will decrease to 35 years based on the assumption changes that were recently adopted by the retirement board, and I believe the council saw those assumption changes a few meetings ago. But more to come on the pension fund, but this presentation does incorporate in addition to the unfunded liability. OPEB. OPEB is the account that we record all retiree health care. The program itself is on a pay-as-you-go basis with approximately $30 million budgeted within the general fund for retiree health care. The ACFR requires that we calculate an annual liability on the overall program. This year's calculation actually resulted in a decrease in the liability, subsequently a decrease in the amount of the unfunded liability. And as you know, we do hold a trust of approximately $90 million that's managed through the Treasury office. But again, this program is closed. Health care is provided to only employees that were hired prior to 2010. And so this program will ultimately run out as we go through the current slate of employees who are set to retire who were hired before 2010. And we project that to be somewhere in 2056, 2057, that we will have a balanced operation. But nonetheless, this program is funded on a pay-as-you-go basis. Now we can shift to reserve compliance. The city's general fund ended the year with approximately 21.5% unreserved fund balance. And as you're aware, the fund balance is used and provides for a stable operation, stable delivery of service, and protects the organization against financial instabilities from revenue downfalls to any other major emergencies that might occur. And this slide simply provides the calculation with an unassigned balance of $217.9 million. That's basically a math equation, if you will, as we compare that amount to the level of the current year's budget. Compliance as it relates to the various government fund reserve, general government funds, the reserve requirements, all funds are falling within compliance except for the Environmental Protection Fund, which is slightly out of compliance, and that's due to a one-time use of fund balance to fund the street sweeping program. But the department is scheduled to establish a multi-year plan to restore the operation back to compliance. All of the various government debt service funds are well within compliance. All of the enterprise funds are all within compliance, and included within the enterprise funds would be the water and sewer operations, stormwater, utility, municipal parking, municipal airport, and solid waste. We've actually seen significant improvement within the solid waste area, and we've seen municipal parking take a turn, a positive turn over the last several years. The internal service funds, as I indicated, the risk fund sits with a net unrestricted net position of approximately negative 18.7 million. But as I indicated, we do have current assets in the fund of 39.2 million to cover any current year emergencies or expenses that may occur. HR department is currently working on a 5 to 10 year restoration plan for the risk fund, but it is definitely an area we're keeping our eyes on as we go forward in 23, in 24, as well as the 25 budget. Information technology systems moved over to the internal service fund for the first time in fiscal 23, I'm sorry. And they're currently reflecting a net deficit in its working capital. However, the fund does have a positive cash working capital of 1.1 million, and the various gap adjustments are causing the working capital to reflect a negative amount. Again, the IT director will be establishing a program to get the fund into compliance over a number of years. It may take a few years. Then as it relates to the unrestricted net position, negative of 14.4 million, that's really comprised of various gap adjustments, and primarily the capital assets far outweigh the negative unrestricted net position, actually leaving IT, information technology systems, with a positive 34.3 million net position. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Tony, who will briefly review the audit findings.
All right, so I'll start with some audit terminology. So material weakness is a deficiency in our internal controls such that it's reasonably possible that we have a material misstatement in our financial reports, while a significant deficiency is a deficiency in internal controls that's less severe. However, the auditors bring it to our attention so we can correct it to avoid future issues. So Reggie talked about the big report you have, the annual financial report. You also have the single audit report that discusses the grant expenditures. So the city had for the year $117 million in grant expenditures. That were 20 departments manage 279 active grants. So everything's it's a citywide effort for the annual report, as always. And you'll see in FY21, we had five audit findings. So we went from 5 audit findings in FY21 to 1 finding last year to 0 findings this year. So once again, we had an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance the auditors can provide. They did emphasize 2 matters related to the Housing Finance Corporation. One was a correction of an error that finance had failed to communicate new GASB standards with HFC staff. So realizing that now, we've put procedures in place to where we'll improve our communications, and that should, that shouldn't happen anymore. And then, again, there was no audit findings, and 1993 was the last time the city had no audit findings. So this is the first time in 30 years that we haven't had an audit finding. That's due to all of the staff right here. Yeah, we've got some outstanding managers. We've got Kate Perry, Christian McCoy, Stephen Nesbitt, and if you guys want to quickly stand, just to be, great job. They're shy. All right, so great job there. And then just real quickly, we have 5 agreed upon procedures that the auditors are finishing up this week, and they haven't identified any issues with that either. So with that, if there's any questions.
Questions, Council Carlos, and then Alan.
Thanks for the presentation, and maybe I can get a little clarification. I know generally, you would want, a higher fund balance to cover, those unexpected costs, disasters, things of that nature that come by. Also an assurance that you can manage your debt, right?
Right.
How much, and we're trending in the right direction, right? The unassigned fund balance is going up. I see the chart on page 19. But how does that correlate with our credit rating? I mean, I don't know if you can quantify it necessarily,
Sure.
but.
Sure. Actually, Mr. Cook presented at the council retreat some information that actually Moody's shared with us actually at last year's credit rating meeting, where they prepare an indicative report, and it's prepared through the credit rating agency where they rate each component of the rating. I don't have that document in front of me,
Yeah,
but.
and nor do I, but maybe to narrow the question.
Sure.
Can it improve our credit rating? I mean, the city's is what? Right?
Yes, absolutely. And
Right.
we definitely, based on the Moody's indicative report, they rate us very highly from the standpoint of having reserves and strong management policies. And those higher ratings within the components help to offset some of the lower ratings for pension and debt, outstanding debt. And so that's why we are heavily focused on trying to raise the fund balance as best we can. Of course, there's always a balance between offering services and having a fund balance, but that's one of the positives, I think, here in Fort Worth, is that we have a really strong fund balance, and not just within the general fund, but based on all of the individual funds that we manage, we require certain fund balances as well. And so we think that's a real positive and positively impacts the credit rating.
Yeah, seems to be. Thank you.
Sure.
So I just want to take a moment and say thank you. At audit committee meeting today, we had a presentation from Ben Conley and Dan Barron from Forvis on the external audit related to this, and you went over the key points from that in your slide 26 and 27. I don't think we can emphasize enough how incredible it is to have such a clean audit. It's been 30 years, and so Reggie, Tony, and the rest of the team, I just really want to say thank you for your tremendous efforts here. I don't think we can emphasize it enough.
Thank you.
Must be that audit chair, right, Alan? And we're up. Yeah. Any other questions, council? Gentlemen, thank you so much. Excellent job. And to the entire team, I can't imagine how many hours went into this. And I will say, while it might not be light reading, there is some really helpful information in here in the analysis. And I've, in the past, gotten really good background on departments and financial information, even other sub-departments of the city. So just wanted to say thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, council, last presentation, and Dana Bergdorf, our assistant city manager, is going to kick things off for us. A presentation on the Panther Island strategic vision.
All right. Very excited to be here. It's hard to follow a clean audit. That's a pretty amazing accomplishment. But I want to thank Mayor and Council for this opportunity. Before we get started, I do want to recognize the partnership and the importance of partnership to this conversation, and also the importance of community engagement. And so we've got an outstanding consultant team, but we wouldn't have gotten here without not just a public partnership, but public-private partnership. And so I'd like to recognize some of the folks that we've been working with over the last year or so. So we've got Tarrant Regional Water District, Tarrant County, Tarrant County College District, Greater Fort Worth Real Estate Council, Downtown Fort Worth Inc., and Streams and Valleys. And so you can imagine getting together 7 different entities to not only draft a scope of work, but hire a consultant and reach consensus on a final report to bring to you today, also to the Tarrant Regional Water District and other boards that will be briefing in the coming weeks. So I did want to mention that in 2022, when the Central City Flood Control Project received its really huge tranche of funding to get that project going, get the bypass channel design underway, to see construction hopefully start in 2025, we realized that we needed to come together and revisit our vision for Panther Island, which the City Council adopted in 2004. And so 20 years later, there's been a lot of changes, a lot of growth in Fort Worth. We've had COVID, we've had changes in the real estate market. And so we realized that we needed some national experts to help us out. And so we're really excited to have HR&A advisors come to us. They've looked at about at least 40 different cities across the US and elsewhere that have dealt with near downtown redevelopment, reuse, and particularly waterfront development. And so it's really exciting, the opportunity that we have here in Panther Island. So in addition to partnerships and in addition to looking at best practices, they also spent a lot of time in community engagement over this last summer and fall, working with property owners, with potentially future property owners, with adjacent districts, adjacent neighborhood leaders, Trinity Metro, the COG, the chambers, TxDOT, on and on. So there's been a lot of work that's gone into this. And so we're excited to see that the guiding principles that they've highlighted and the recommendations that they've identified really reflect the community input that we all heard. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Managing Partner with HR&A, Carrie Hirstein, to kick off the consultant presentation. So come on over to this mic. It's as Mayor Pro Tem Bivens says, it makes you look better on this side.
Well, thank you, Dana. As Dana mentioned, I'm Carrie Hirstein. I'm a managing partner with HR&A Advisors, and really pleased to be here to speak with you about Panther Island. You know, I want to begin by recognizing really what an amazing partnership of public and civic entities that this effort represents. It's a real pleasure to get to do this work. It's even a greater pleasure when that foundation has been laid when we come to a city. And the complexity of this project warrants that level of involvement, and it's been great to see that level of integration and collaboration among the 7 partners listed here. We began working about a year ago. We are a team of 4 firms, HR&A Advisors, a real estate and economic development consulting firm. We work in cities all across the country to help create vital places, build more equitable and resilient cities. And I'm pleased to be joined here by my partner, Aaron Abelson, who's the managing partner of our Dallas office. We brought aboard Lake Flato, an urban design and architecture firm out of Austin, and you'll hear from Justin Garrison, their director of planning, in a moment. But it's been a real honor and privilege to work on a project of such importance for the city. So we've been working for close to a year with this group in very close collaboration with the steering committee and executive committee that was formed. Very recently, we've just released 3 documents. It's really 2 documents and an executive summary. But our assignment was 2 main things. One, as Dana pointed out, the vision for Panther Island was one that was cast over 20 years ago. As we can all imagine and appreciate, a lot has changed in the world since then. So now was a really important time, and I'll talk about that in a moment, to sort of rethink that and come up with a renewed vision. So led by Justin and his team, we're releasing a sort of renewed vision that really distills our engagement of the public, our work with the steering committees, to establish an urban planning and urban design framework for the island. It is a foundation for thinking about, for all the work that needs to be done moving forward around the island. The second sister document to that is a real estate economic development and implementation strategy. that lays out the steps by which the public sector in particular can really leverage this opportunity to catalyze development, to maximize the economic and social good produced by the island, and to lay out a roadmap for its implementation over time. It's important to recognize that there are two separate projects, of which our focus has really been the latter. So there is the Central City Flood Control Project, which is a larger regional effort to protect flood, to promote flood control that involves the bypass channel. Now, when that bypass channel is built and the sort of interior measures required along the Trinity River come into play, the levees can come down. And so a lot of the land that sits today vacant on Panther Island that has been reserved for flood control purposes can take on upon a new use. So the flood control project, simplify things, unlocks this economic development opportunity. Our charge was to think about that economic development opportunity. And we did so really, I think, at an important point in time. You know, the receipt of over $400 million from the U.S. Army Corps a few years ago, matched by meaningful local contributions by the city, the county, the water district, and others, really has unlocked this momentum in new opportunity for the planning, the design, and the construction of many of the improvements associated with the flood control project. People are beginning to see actual progress from this project that have been talked about for a very long time. There are bridges that are built, and people are going to see more and more progress with the flood control project over the coming years. So this was a really important point to re-engage on a vision for the island and an implementation strategy. And so we didn't do that from scratch. We really built on 2 decades of planning work that has been done, lots of really careful engineering work that has been put into place through the flood control design work, and really tried to build upon that and instill a vision that met where we are today as a community. This is I can't emphasize this enough, this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to take advantage of. You are the fastest growing city in Texas, one of the fastest growing cities in the country. This is an opportunity to capture that growth, to strengthen that growth, really in your urban core, in an infill environment, not on the periphery of your city, but in its core. And, you know, Aaron, Justin, and I work all across the country. It's really hard to think about an example in other cities of this magnitude, of this centrality, and this potential. So I don't want that to be lost on you. This is a really momentous opportunity, both in terms of scale. Between the North and South Island, we have 335 acres of land. Should this vision come to fruition, about 190 acres of that is developable. So it's an amazing canvas really to build upon. There's a tremendous amount of vacant land that has been reserved for flood control purposes, and that allows us to really think about the future of this place and reinvent it. The centrality of this location is so important given its adjacency to downtown, to the cultural district, to the stockyards, to Northside, and allows the opportunity for us really to think about a place that no longer is a place you just drive through, but a place that connects all of these rich assets and rich communities, and in doing so elevates all of them. So we really want to think of this project as a way to sort of deliver upon that goal. As Dana noted, a sort of incredibly important project like this requires the time and focus to talk to lots of people in the community about this work. So we really focused on trying to engage, the broad citizenry of Fort Worth, but really many of the communities that surround it, and landowners, businesses that exist on it today. We sponsored 6 different public meetings where we invited specific communities to each of them. We spent a lot of time with a steering committee and executive committee that was formed from those 7 sponsoring public and civic entities. And we undertook a lot of interviews and surveys and panel discussions And those really shaped all of our thinking. So what you'll see are not our ideas. We're not coming from out of town and putting our thoughts on you. It's our job really to distill what we're hearing from everybody and bring that together in something that is visionary but practical. So 6 key themes kind of came out through many of those discussions, and those informed our guiding principles, which I'll talk about right now, and which our team here will expand upon. First, the idea of creating this really one-of-a-kind district that engages the waterfront. We have this opportunity today to have a district that engages the river in a way that downtown has not had the benefit to do today, and that many of the adjacent communities have not. We also have the opportunity to build something that is authentically of Fort Worth, but is unique and different and complementary to it. And in fact, create something that is unlike anything in Texas or the country. This is an opportunity really to create a diversity of park spaces, green spaces, open spaces across the island that integrate into, sort of touch the river and bring people to the waterfront, that integrate to the canal system, which is a really unique feature of the flood control project, and allow us to not just create an amenity for Panther Island, but to think about this network of active urban signature green spaces that are an amenity for everybody, the communities all around, for downtown, and for the greater region. It's an opportunity to really have a vibrant mixed-use destination that's about people and about community building. So you'll hear from us, this is about a place where people can live and commute to downtown, where they can work, where they can play and visit. And it's about creating new experiences. And we really thought about how do we get these interactions and how do we get the types of experiences that build community and build the social fabric that makes great places great. And in doing so, how do we do that really at a human scale? This is a place for people, first and foremost. As I had mentioned, we really want to think about this as a source for connection and for complementing surrounding neighborhoods. So everything we did was not just about what would make Panther Island great, but how is Panther Island an asset, a source of synergy for its surrounding communities. And in doing so, starting to think about how we celebrate Fort Worth's diverse communities and its heritage. Aaron will talk a little bit about some of the tools and resources we want to deploy to really make this a place that welcomes everybody, that honors and celebrates the history of the island. And also to think about this project as bigger than something that's just, 200 developable acres or 330 acres. This is about the future of Fort Worth in many ways. This is one of the most important projects you have to define the future of this city, and to think about this project as a meaningful economic driver in your future. I will hand things over to Justin in a moment, but the last thing I'll say is that the other thing that really makes this a tremendous opportunity is the public sector's control of land. And as we talk about all the types of benefits and how we deliver upon this vision, the fact that you and your partners, predominantly the Water District, control such a significant amount of land provides the opportunity for the public entities really to dictate its future, to select the right development partners, the right community partners to work with, to dictate the outcomes it seeks to achieve and the public policy objectives it seeks to achieve. But there's also an important aspect of this that's all about public-private partnership, which is both about working with the existing landowners, as shown here in red, as well as new parties that will come to the table with the desire of investing in Panther Island and helping build its future. So I'm pleased to hand things over now to Justin Garrison from Lake Flato, who will talk a little more about the urban design framework.
Great. Thanks, Carrie. Thank you so much for having us here today. It's a pleasure. It's been a pleasure working with everyone on this project to date, and it's an exciting moment for us to help reveal that vision to you all. So as Carrie mentioned, the next few slides I'm going to walk you through is a little bit of the updated strategic vision for the urban design and planning part of it. What this is not is a detailed master plan. This is a framework plan that builds upon the previous efforts to date and outlines some key features and recommendations related to urban design and planning as well as to look at the future evolution implementation of the district. So as you see here on the screen is accumulation of all of these amazing features and recommendations that we're talking about. And I'll walk you through in a few pages what those mean, but that is access to more open space. That is creating a continuous public accessible waterfront, having a walkable and connected district scale blocks for people, having an efficient and connected road network, and having an efficient and connected bike network as well. But also thinking about amazing opportunities for a robust transit network. And again, as Carrie's mentioned, there's a once in a lifetime opportunity here. Panther Island with the canals. I mean, this does not really exist with this much waterfront in the United States. You have to look elsewhere for a true vision like this. So an amazing opportunity. And I want to mention that there's a lot more detail in the report, so we're covering high level here, so I encourage everyone to go look at the recommendations in the final report. But as we kind of break down those ideas from an open space network big idea, we looked at, could there be successful districts around the world? Is there one large open space for Panther Island? And as we looked at the existing constraints of Panther Island and what's happening in previous visions as well, we come to a conclusion that a distributed network is actually probably the best idea moving forward at Panther Island. And what that does is it allows you to break down those open spaces and move them across the Panther Island and make each open space be within a 5-minute walk to anyone that lives nearby. It allows you to have them to be interconnected to each other. It allows different open spaces and green spaces to have different identity and program. They could be on the water. They could be interior to the district. They could have different future identities and visions that for the community. These are open spaces for everyone of Fort Worth. This is not just for Panther Island. And as you think about how that starts to play itself out, and in terms of the implementation, when you distribute it and you break them down, open space could be phased over time. So as you see the kind of imagery of what that could look like of the open space conditions, it's a mixture of scale. It's for festivals and events. There's a natural experience. There's an active experience. There's hardscape, there's softscape and then there's also opportunities for stormwater capture and the needs of the density that requires that.
I'll just sort of lean in quickly and say that these parks and open space in some ways do double duty for us. One, they deliver these great public amenities that open the island up for everyone, but they also create significant value for the land around it. So a lot of what you'll hear us talking about is how does the public sector over time invest and continue to create value on the island. All of the infrastructure, everything that needs to be built is costly, and we have to have viable development economics to do that. So creating this type of green infrastructure is a really effective way that we've seen and put to use in cities all across the country to really sort of bring both benefits in terms of land value premiums, absorptions, sort of market absorption as well. So that's, sort of a core goal as well, and thinking about how they're distributed to bring that opportunity to lots of different land holdings across the island.
And as we've been talking about the importance of Panther Island and its relationship to water, so there's 3 major features of Panther Island and its water engagement. That is the bypass channel, the canal system, the Panther Lake, and the Trinity River. So all 3 of those basically encompass the waterfront. So when we say public accessible waterfront, it is all 3 of those experiences. The entirety edge of Panther Island is publicly accessible. And what that experience could be like in the water as well as adjacent to the water could be building on what's happening today, as well as having art and culture and community, various water interactions, boardwalks, marinas, gathering spaces. You have the place to live, place to shop, place to dine, all connected to the experience of water. So an amazing opportunity here to play that out with the community. And when it comes to the road network, looking at this, we were making some tweaks to it, but really the main points is just making the roads more efficient and connected internally to Panther Island, but also externally to the surrounding neighborhoods, and giving certain identities to roads that help them make a special opportunity and experience. So for example, 4th Street maybe becomes a green street connector connecting riverfront park to riverfront to park. And you can kind of see what that could look like in the bottom left image here. creating this double tree LA promenade, but also opportunities for roads to close down for festivals and events. Roads to be accessible through transit, through bike network, through stormwater capture, but also make them the most pedestrian-friendly streets you can imagine here as well. And what happens on the streets is the transit. And there's an amazing opportunity here to think about the future transit of Panther Island and the opportunity of this high-capacity corridor that could connect you from downtown through Panther Island to the Stockyards to Northside Station. So a key recommendation is really just think about the future of that and the density that Panther Island would help strengthen the reality of this, as well as implementing an east-west mobility connection and connecting to those neighborhoods as well. And then internal to Panther Island, having more of a maybe a mobility loop connector within that larger island, connecting you to getting access to people, to the parks, to the waterfronts. You can see here mirrored images of, it's the buses, it's the multimodal access where you can ride a bike, you can get on a bus, you could potentially get on a future streetcar, and the future of mobility circulator is fun ideas as the kind of culture of community evolves into that world. And the idea of Panther Island is that we want to make it a place for people. So this needs to be people designed first. So habitats for humans, and that's really in places for people, and breaking down the scale blocks to making sure that they're walkable and connected. But also, we showed a lot of roads and transit in and out of Panther Island. We want to make sure that people can get to Panther Island on foot. So that's pedestrian bridges, and that's connecting to your surrounding neighborhoods as well. And what that can feel like and look like from a pedestrian standpoint, again, it's those experiences with open spaces and water, bridges, and the connectivity even within the interior aspect of the island, and creating a walkable, human-focused opportunity. And from a scale and density standpoint and programmatically, looking at opportunities to have a mix of uses to where they can cater, again, to where you can live, work, play, entertain, recreate, and have all that opportunities here where a mixture of scale where it's people-focused and the density isn't scary and it's not tall tower slamming down on the ground. There is a play and mixture of heights that could go from 1 to 2 stories, and we'll talk a bit on the max height, what that could be. But a mixture of scale just creates a comfortable and pedestrian-friendly environment. And the mix of uses allow that to happen as well. So it's not predominantly one use across the island. And as we talked about height, we looked at, from a high-level standpoint, the overall height allowance. This is not a form-based code. We're not here telling you exactly what parcel is a certain height and setbacks and step-backs and the realities of that. But we are looking at holistically, how can we recommend some density and height on Panther Island? And to think about successful districts that break this down, we wanted to recommend that we create a flexible kind of height allowance. And the previous form-based code had these sub-districts that were pretty detailed, and kind of breaking that down and making it more flexible, and encouraging height around certain aspects, and that is transit. So you can see the kind of heat map where there might be future transit stops, and having density around transit, having density around select open spaces that Carrie was mentioning, the economic reality of that. And then also having density around Panther Lake as the sheer scale of it, but then making sure that we're being cognizant of our neighbors and the surrounding view corridors, and saying view from downtown to Panther Island, from Panther Island to downtown, to stepping down to Northside, stepping down to Samuels Avenue, that there is a sensitivity here you can see down in this section here, but a recommendation of heights to achieve that. And then maintaining the previous form-based code, it had the tallest zones and maintaining those heights as they are, but I'm mixing that in with the recommendations of the future. I'm gonna hand it off to Aaron to keep going on the implementation.
Good afternoon. I'm Aaron Abelson, Managing Partner for Texas with HRNA Advisors. And you heard a lot from Carrie and Justin about what the strategic vision update puts forward and recommends. I'll spend a few minutes talking a little bit about how it might move forward. And I think it's fair to say anyone who's lived in Fort Worth for a while or tracked the Panther Island project or been part of complicated projects anywhere, patience is a virtue, and that these projects take a long time to plan and a long time to implement. But at the same time, it was also a charge from the steering committee, but also a priority in our work to think about what are the opportunities to do something soon? What can happen in the near term both to sort of demonstrate progress, take advantage of the flood control work that's happening, but really took sort of an analytical approach to say, okay, yes, it's going to take some time for the flood control work to be completed and the entirety of the island development opportunities to be available. But as we dug into the infrastructure, as we dug into what exists, where there are things drawing people to Panther Island today. There are people living in the Encore apartments, for example. People go to Panther Island Brewery, to Coyote Drive-In. And really what it boils down to is that even in advance of the flood control work being completed and the levees being decommissioned and able to be taken down, everything you see in red with some infrastructure development could be set up to move forward. And most notably, the Zone 1, the darkest red that you can see on the screen, there are opportunities that could move forward in the very near term with infrastructure that is in place and connecting in with the canal section that already exists. And so, this work, I think, really helped put forward a phasing approach that the project partners can use to guide some decision-making about infrastructure and development. And as we, engaged with community members, as we engaged with some of you, I think it became quite clear that it's important not just that the Panther Island project happen and come to fruition, but that it be done in a thoughtful and equitable way, which really boiled down to three goals. One, and these are important to sort of understand and have on the table now and be planning proactively for, to ensure that that the economic opportunities associated with the development of Panther Island can accrue to the neighborhoods around the project, to citizens across Fort Worth. That this project links very closely in with the city's economic development plan and the sort of economic and workforce training initiatives and efforts and priorities that you all have defined. It's important to acknowledge that large-scale projects, large-scale investments like this can and do have impacts on the neighborhoods around them. And there's the benefit of this project that its location has a little bit of distance from those neighborhoods, but it's important to be planning proactively for those impacts and planning for things like affordable housing within the project. And lastly, using through design, through programming, making sure that Panther Island is a place that is welcoming, that is inclusive, that people of all ages, people of all races, people from every neighborhood, and in particular some of those that are closest to Panther Island, can and do want to be there and can see themselves there. None of this happens without financial resources, and I think there's been so much invested to date. And our team spent time thinking about, for all of the infrastructure that's required, for all of the buildings that are going to have to be built, it's really going to require a multi-layered and public-private approach to funding. You all have already invested in a lot of the infrastructure that's necessary for the flood control work, and that's ongoing. And I think in this case, it's about finding the balance of developer contributions, the use of public land, and other funding opportunities, many of which can be accrued through typical fees or repayment to make the project feasible. And similarly, large-scale projects like this often require some governance approaches that can ensure that the vision like that we're describing today has the resources and capacity in place to steward over the long term. And so we've put forward some recommendations in close collaboration with the steering committee and the executive committee to ensure that organizational structure and governance and the level of collaboration and the level of commitment that we've seen over the course of the last year is institutionalized and not lost as the project moves forward. And so establishing a new organization to oversee and steward that plan, formalizing some of the near-term agreements around infrastructure development, and making sure that, as the project moves into operation and there's parks and open spaces to champion and to steward, that the organizational structures are in place to attract, public and private and philanthropic resources, and program and operate high-quality spaces. And so there's a lot of work to come. This is one important step and reflects a lot of work from many on both our team and the client team. And just to highlight a few of the next steps that are over the next coming years, there's a need to be a focus on Zone 1 to make some of that early activation possible. Of course, on the architecture and planning front, updating the form-based code is going to be a process that you all will, of course, be very involved in. And leading the infrastructure planning, you want to not get behind on it and make sure you're setting up to be ready for development, and preparing for this governance effort, the governance structures to be in place. A number of those things that are going to be important to move forward most immediately. And so we are just excited to be here. I think this is an exciting moment. It's not an easy project. It's a complicated project. It's going to require a lot of continued attention and commitment. And we hope that the work we've done and collaborated with many folks and the community on can help equip you to move it forward. And we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Carlos, I think you had a question.
Yes, thanks for the presentation. I know you've worked very hard with it, and I appreciate the continued outreach that you made. You've done those multiple times, and I know that Councilwoman Beck and I have been watching this carefully. In particular, I like that you added the the massing renderings. I think that went far to kind of addressing some of the concerns that some had in trying to picture what development could look like, per zones. So this is a development vision, as you said. It's not a master plan per se. It does prescribe, with the stakeholder input that we received, how development could go, again, within, form-based code context. So, I'll let Councilwoman Beck talk about the downtown, input that they've received. But the way I see it is, Panther Island, downtown are neighbors, right? And Panther Island is just starting on a very long road of development. Downtown continues to evolve and continues to develop. I think that both, as neighbors, can do more than just merely coexist. They can, I think, benefit from each other's development courses and raise each other, both in the process. So the developments that we've been talking about that are possibilities for, Panther Island range from residential entertainment, open spaces, office spaces. That's a big swath, right? A lot can happen, within that. And again, I want to emphasize that this is mutually complementary, I think, with the downtown neighbors, including those older neighborhoods like Northside that have existed there, for a very long time, have been watching this and have been very active, in the stakeholder input process. So all this built around the infrastructure needs that we've been talking about, the Central City River Project, flood control, accessibility, surrounding neighborhoods, mobility. I like the parts, that you've outlined, that you identified that we need to keep in mind as we go into the form-based code development.
Thank you for stating that, Carlos. I really appreciate that. And thank y'all for all of the work that you've done. Like Councilman Flores said, we've been watching this pretty closely. We've got a lot of stakeholders that are very interested because they are neighbors to Panther Island. And I appreciate your attention to downtown when going through this process. The one thing that I want to make sure that we're not losing sight of is that it also neighbors West 7th. And so with downtown, now Panther Island and West 7th, which got a couple years head start on Panther Island in our redevelopment efforts. This particular area of the city is we're hopefully setting it up to see some very explosive growth and densification of people living there. And so thank you for doing this. Thank you for giving us something big to achieve for. The only thing I would ask is that moving forward, we also make sure that we're including those neighbors in the West 7th area, because I can tell you from the emails that I get, they are just as interested in what's happening here as my folks in downtown as well. So thank you.
Gina.
I lived in San Antonio for 4 years. I can't wait to stick it to them in their river walk. Serious. I have some very positive feedback to offer, but when it gets to that is questionable, I'm going to call staff because you guys don't need to be bothered with the negativity. But one thing that I really like, when you talk about a 5-minute walk, that is awesome. I see Richard Zavala back there. He knows I'm going to talk about the 10-minute standard. You know, national park standards dictate if you are not within a 10-minute walk to a park, you are underserved. So you guys are knocking that out of the park. Now, you mentioned so much about transit. I'm hoping you've had a conversation with the beautiful mind of Michael Morris, because Michael just comes up with things that are just crazy but brilliant. And it's very, very interesting for me to watch his brain work. A few of us serve on the Regional Transportation Council. Let's see, I had another note here. Tell me again, because I had to walk out to kind of wake up a while ago. But you talked about the importance of public-private land in terms of public ownership. What makes that so good?
I think what makes that so important is that you can control the timing and help drive the specific outcomes of what you seek with that land. You know, one of the great things of the public sector is that it can be patient, it can think in the long term, and this is one of those efforts where you want to get it right. I mean, this is going to matter for generations and generations. So to have that land and to be able to dictate which land gets set aside for public open space, when you dispose of land, to think about the types of things you want to achieve in that. We're very focused on a fully publicly accessible waterfront as one example. But we're also talking about things like affordable and workforce housing and how those are integrated. So the control to be able to say, well, this is what we want to achieve, to go to the market and choose the development partners that you have the greatest trust in partnering with to execute that, and to dictate the order and timing by which that happens is a great gift. Now, don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that projects won't jump up and pop up here and there. You know, private developers, private landowners have rights to develop their land, and they will pursue. So it is not as if this is you know, a plan that needs to be followed to a T, but it creates a structure, a framework by which you can proceed in building out portions of the island.
Well, I look forward to frequent reports from you guys and updates. And now I need staff to get to the podium. I hate to be a party pooper, but one thing that I never will forget was when I went through Leadership Fort Worth, and we had McGowan doing part of the tour. He talked about Samuels Avenue.
Yes.
Samuels Avenue has a history that does not rest well with African Americans in this city. That's where the lynching occurred.
That's right.
And so what I would like to make sure is that we give appropriate recognition in however that is going to be conveyed, because we just can't gloss over history.
That's right.
And I'm not the one, but you know, you've got people who have people, and we've got the Black historical and genealogical people. Let me finish, then I'm gonna sit down because it's y'all's district, not mine. But it's just really important to me that we recognize that. But just know I am really excited about this. I think you guys were right on the mark, you know, for this. And I'm going to be there with pom-poms and everything, but I had to mention that.
Yeah.
And now I defer to the councilwoman.
Well, I have some great news for you.
Tell me.
So you mentioned that Samuels Avenue does have a very dark past. And the site of that particular lynching has been purchased through a very generous grant from the Rainwater Foundation. And the city of Fort Worth is working with those partners to help make sure that there is a permanent memorialization of that event there on Samuels Avenue. So we're working on it.
So in addition to Ellis Pecan, we bought this land too?
We didn't buy the land. Someone else bought
it. Purchased.
Right, and we're working with them to make sure.
So there are two different sites?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. He didn't, we didn't, oh, yeah. Well, when I see Fernando getting up, he's getting ready to clean it up so that people know exactly where we
Well,
stand.
I think Councilor Beck has put her finger on it. The city is cooperating on the development of a Fred Rouse Memorial at the site of that event. And it may be appropriate at a future date for us to bring you a briefing by Mr. Fred Rouse III about that significant project.
He worked for my dad years ago. And are you still convening that group of black clergy over at Hazel Harvey Peace?
You may be referring to.
With Michael Bell and the others?
We have met on several occasions. We have not met in the past several months because that group was focused principally on events associated with a criminal trial. But that's a valuable resource for this project and for others of its kind.
It's going to be very important that they be updated, because if not, they'll feel left out.
We'll be sure to do that.
Okay. Thank you. And again, this is awesome.
Thank you. Dana and team, thank y'all for the presentation today. I think we had a few people. I know Dan Buman is here. Thank you, Dan, for taking the time. Yes. I saw Mayor Barr here as well. Yes. Thank you, Mayor Barr. Ken came to my office, gosh, it's been 18, 24 months ago, to say, you know, what if we convened a great group of partners, and we've achieved to this. So thank you for all the incredible work. I think, yeah, Stacey Pierce is here from Stearnsville. I thought she left. Is she still here? I just can't see you. Carlos has good hair. Congratulations, Carlos. Hi, Stacey. I don't really have a lot of specifics to share. I think that as the residents of Fort Worth kind of get used to this plan, I'm really optimistic of how positive it is. You've gone through a lot of stakeholder meetings, and public transparency has been at the center of this, which we really do appreciate. The other thing I would mention is that we're so proud of the partnership we have with the Water District right now. Dan, kudos to you and your entire team and your board. Everything we've needed, at least since I've been mayor, you've gone above and beyond. And I think that partnership is reflected here in this document, because the only way this project is accomplished is if the two governmental entities are really working closely together. So thank you very much for all that you've done so far. And council, I think that all of us have a piece of this. This may be specific to D9 and D2, but I hope that you see the transformative opportunity that this presents. And so if you have questions that are not addressed in this executive summary, or you want additional information or really want it culled down to smaller pieces, I know this team could do that for you, so that you feel like you've got the information you could send out to your respective organizations. And there's Miss Kate Beck. I didn't see Kate either. Kate is a traitor. No. Kidding. Kate works for the city of Fort Worth.
She's been assimilated.
She has, I know. She's got a foot in both places. Teasing aside, we wouldn't be here without you either, Kate. Thank you for all your expertise. We appreciate it. That's all. Thank you. Council, that's the last of our presentations today. I think we can move to future agenda items as needed. If anybody has any. Elizabeth, please.
I would like an update on our ARPA funds. I know that the time period in which we have to use them or lose them is approaching, and so I'd just like to see where we are on that. And then the second IR, I would like to task staff with exploring installing baby boxes into our safe haven locations, and what that would look like from a strategic standpoint and a financial standpoint as well. Baby boxes are essentially specialized units where, instead of knocking on the fire station door or the hospital door, a parent can put the infant in that box, and it's been shown across the nation to be highly effective at saving newborns that are otherwise going to be abandoned.
Yeah, you'll have to help me understand the baby box. We'll talk. I'd like to revisit the Stop 6 Memorandum of Understanding. it dawned on me, we've got two new key players, and they have not really been brought in, that being Fort Worth ISD and TCC. And I'd like to make sure that we acknowledge the interest from United Way. And so it might be just a report or the convening, but it needs to be stated into the public record because of all the partners who've been so helpful with that Stop 6 revitalization plan.
Sounds good. Anyone else on future agenda items? Chris?
Yeah, I have one. I got a question. I want to know, I know that we did our negotiation with the meeting confer agreement for 10 years, but I think every 4 years, every 4. Okay. Oh, it's only 4 years. I want to know who are our stakeholders as a part of that negotiation and just an update on what it looks like. I think we're approaching the 4 years, maybe in a couple of years, something like that.
I can, real briefly, that we're in the process of doing the negotiations on the meet and confer for police. That agreement will expire at the end of September of this year, right? And that'll then go for the next 4 years. Last year, we did fire, and it'll go for another 3 years.
I got one more, Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
I need everybody who is watching this on TV, who's listening to it, who can read a paper. Sometime in March, this month, we're going to have the biggest party you've ever seen. It's going to be at Trinity Boulevard and 820 as we formally celebrate the opening of the Trinity Lake Station. I rode that station to Dart last week. It's easy. Although they did send an envoy to ride with me, I guess they thought I'd get lost again. But it's going to be fabulous. And in time, we'll get you to Houston within 90 minutes from that location. So sometime in March, we don't have a date yet, but everybody get ready for it. It's going to be fabulous.
Thank you, Gina. Jared, did you have something?
Yes, ma'am. And Mayor Pro Tem, I look forward to riding that train with you at some point.
We're going to make you pay.
I just have one. Hey, I don't mind that, but I'll have you know that might take food out of Janelle's mouth, so. Anyways, I just want to follow up on our earlier conversation. Just to request formally an informal report on regular monthly fees that are charged to our residents. So if you could just provide something really quick about what are the average regular monthly fees that our residents are paying, that'll be helpful in that conversation that we had earlier.
Anyone else on agenda items? Okay, thank you. Meeting's adjourned. Huh? Yeah, I will. I need it though. Council, I'm just going to read this for executive session to start. The City Council will now convene into executive session on the following matters. The City Council will conduct a closed meeting in order to seek the advice of its attorneys as authorized by Section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code. Deliberate concerning real property matters as authorized by Section 551.072 of the Texas Government Code. Deliberate concerning economic development negotiations as authorized by Section 551.087 Texas Government Code. Deliberate concerning security is authorized by Section 551.076 and Section 551.089 of the Texas Government Code. And deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, and duties of the city auditor as authorized by Section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code.